सीज फायर खत्म। अब पूरे खानसार में सिर्फ एक ही कानून चलेगा और वो है राजा का कानून। राजा बनना मेरी जिद थी, लेकिन इस तख्त की हिफाजत करना अब मेरी मजबूरी है, चाहे सामने कोई भी हो।
खानसार की मिट्टी में एक खास बात है। यहाँ बीज नहीं, सिर्फ बारूद और बदला उगता है।
मैंने तुझे अपनी ढाल बनाया था वर्धा, लेकिन तूने उसी ढाल पर पीछे से वार कर दिया। गुलामी की कड़ियों को पिघलाकर अब हम अपना नया राजा चुनेंगे। मैं यहां राज करने नहीं आया, मैं यहां उस खून का हिसाब लेने आया हूं जो बह चुका है।
इतिहास गवाह है, शौर्यांगा कबीले ने जब भी तलवार उठाई है, खानसार के बड़े से बड़े सूरमाओं के सर धड़ से अलग हुए हैं।
Imagine a world, if you will, that operates on a completely unique, like almost alien set of physical and societal laws.
Right.
In this world, human emotion isn't just, something you feel internally. It is literally measured in muscle, in kinetic force.
Yeah. In the sheer physical weight of a blow.
Exactly. And political power. I mean, it's not something politely debated in a boardroom.
Definitely not.
And it's certainly not decided at a ballot box. It is a currency. And, well, that currency is paid exclusively and heavily in blood.
It's just an incredibly brutalist reality to step into. I mean, it demands a complete recalibration of your moral compass just to understand the baseline of how people survive there.
Terrifying, honestly, but completely hypnotic at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
So today we are taking you on a deep dive into exactly that world. We're breaking down the mechanics, the lore, and the sheer sensory impact of this monumental piece of Indian cinema.
Salaar. Part 2, Shouryaanga Parvam.
That's the one. And we have a very specific mission for this exploration today, don't we?
We really do. Because, to simply call this film an action movie is just fundamentally misunderstanding what it's trying to do.
Right.
It is actually a massive, deliberate rebellion against the current state of modern action cinema.
Yes, exactly. I mean, when you look at most modern action epics today, there's a very distinct trend.
Oh, for sure. The whole genre has moved in one direction.
Yeah, the focus is almost always on sleek, agile, incredibly fast-paced choreography.
Right. It's all about precision.
It's about how many flawless moves a character can execute in a 3-second window. But what we are going to dissect today is how Salaar 2 just violently rebels against that whole idea.
Violently is the perfect word for it, honestly.
We are going to explore its crushing visual style, its heavy metal action choreography, and how these incredibly dense physical elements directly mirror the dark, twisted, psychological evolution of its characters.
You really have to brace yourself for it. I mean, you can't just casually sit back and watch this the way you would like a typical summer blockbuster.
Definitely not.
The pacing, the weight, the narrative demands. It all requires active participation from you as a viewer.
And watching the transition from the first film, Ceasefire, to this second part, Shouryaanga Parvam, is just jarring in the best way possible.
Oh, it's a massive shift.
Part 1 was essentially watching someone meticulously build a ticking time bomb. You saw the wires being connected, you heard the ticking in the background.
The tension was entirely in the anticipation.
Exactly, the anticipation of the blast. But Part 2 is the documentation of the devastating nuclear fallout.
Yeah.
The bomb has gone off. We are walking through the radioactive ash. But to truly understand the incredibly unique, heavy way these characters are fighting in this fallout, we have to look at the terrifying arena they're fighting in.
Right. We have to talk about Khanzar. And it's vital to frame this fictional dystopian city not just as a cool geographical backdrop.
It's so much more than that.
It really is. It's a living, breathing antagonist. Khanzar is a monster in its own right, and it actively shapes the violence that happens within its borders.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the shift in how the camera treats Khanzar from the first movie to the second is super dramatic.
Oh, completely.
In Part 1, we were mostly looking up, right?
Exactly. In Ceasefire, the perspective was firmly planted in the halls of power. We were watching the elite ruling class.
Right, the lords and the politicians.
Yeah, we saw the high walls, the political machinations of the people sitting in these comfortable chairs, making decisions that ruined lives miles away.
But then in Shouryaanga Parvam, that lens is just ripped downward.
Violently downward.
Right.
The focus violently shifts to the deeply entrenched caste and tribal hierarchies that actually govern this lawless territory from the dirt up.
It's what's been described as the weaponization of the borderlands.
I love that phrase.
It's so accurate, right?
Yeah.
Think about those outer rings of Kansar. In the first movie, they were depicted merely as industrial wasteland.
Just sprawling slums of rust and smoke.
Yeah, places where human life had absolutely zero currency. They existed solely to extract resources for the elites in the center.
And that's the crucial pivot. In Part 2, those exact same wastelands are transformed into primary strategic and tactical battlegrounds.
It's fascinating.
The protagonist, Deva, isn't, marching an army to the front gates of the palace. He takes the geography of poverty and turns it into a lethal advantage.
He essentially uses the machine of their oppression to crush the oppressors.
That's exactly what he does.
We're talking about labyrinthine mining tunnels that the elites don't even know the layouts of, massive abandoned iron foundries.
And these desolate, completely exposed supply roads.
Yeah. He uses all of this to run a terrifyingly effective guerrilla warfare campaign against the heavily armed royal guard.
It's not a battle of open fields with two armies charging at each other.
Right, it's a battle of claustrophobic, rusty corridors where the environment itself is a trap.
Which brings us to the people who actually know those tunnels, the Shouryaanga tribe.
Oh, man, let's get into the Shouryaangas.
To understand why Deva fights the way he does, you have to understand the cultural mythos of his people.
It's so dense.
It is. The film dedicates a significant amount of time, through layered historical flashbacks, to establish the specific identity of this clan.
Okay.
And the most important thing to grasp here is that the Shouryaangas are not your standard, clean-cut, righteous rebels fighting the evil empire.
Yeah, they aren't the scrappy underdogs with hearts of gold.
Not at all.
They are a hyper-disciplined, deeply religious warrior clan. Their entire societal structure from birth to death is tied to an ancient, uncompromising code of martial honor.
They are zealots. I mean, truly. Their rituals, their distinct war paint, their terrifying initiation rites.
The initiation stuff is wild.
It really is. It all points to a history where they were the ultimate arbiters of justice in Kansar. They were the executioners.
The enforcers of a very dark, bloody law.
Exactly. So when they are ousted and slaughtered by the other ruling tribes, it's not just a political coup. It's a desecration of their sacred duty.
And that completely changes the stakes. This transforms Deva's mission from a simple personal revenge plot.
The standard, you betrayed me, so I'm coming for you trope.
Right. It changes it into a full-blown holy war for cultural resurrection.
It elevates the violence into a religious sacrament. When a Shouryaanga warrior steps onto the battlefield, they aren't just fighting for territory.
Or political leverage.
No, they're fighting for the metaphysical soul of their tribe. They are enacting divine retribution.
It makes me think of Kansar's outer rings like a massive, rusted, industrial chessboard.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
But instead of playing by the normal rules where pawns march forward to get slaughtered by knights and rooks, the pawns are using the very board itself.
Collapsing the tunnels, superheating the foundries.
Exactly. Turning the physical environment into a weapon to trap the kings. They aren't trying to win the game, they are trying to break the board in half.
And because they view themselves as the rightful, sacred enforcers of this broken board, it directly dictates how they execute violence.
Which is the core of what we're looking at today.
Right. They don't fight like modern soldiers. They fight like ancient executioners. Which brings us to a style of cinematic combat that completely shatters what audiences have been conditioned to expect.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the absolute focal point of our exploration today, the action philosophy of Salaar 2.
It's such a massive shift.
There is a huge intentional contrast between this film and the current titans of contemporary action cinema.
Let's contextualize that for a second.
Yeah.
If you look at the landscape of modern action epics.
Think of the John Wick franchise, right?
Yeah, John Wick, the Bourne films, or even the incredible legacy of traditional Hong Kong martial arts cinema. The guiding principle is agility.
The aesthetic is inherently fast-paced.
It's all about precision. It's a ballet of violence where the thrill comes from seeing how seamlessly a character can transition from a judo throw to a headshot in a fraction of a second.
It's incredibly light on its feet.
Very kinetic. Frictionless almost.
Exactly, frictionless. The protagonist slices through a dozen bad guys like a hot knife through butter. But Salaar 2 completely rejects the hot knife.
It really does.
It relies entirely on the concept of crushing weight,
Yeah.
and what's best described as the choreography of heavy metal.
Heavy metal is the perfect descriptor, honestly, literally and figuratively. Look at the specific weaponry Diva and the Shouryaanga warriors are wielding.
Oh man, the weapons are insane.
We aren't talking about sleek, carbon fiber tactical knives or lightweight, perfectly balanced katanas.
Got it all.
These characters are hauling around oversized, archaic, brutal instruments of blunt force trauma.
We're talking thick iron broadswords that look like they weigh 40 pounds.
Yeah, and modified industrial tools.
Right. Mining picks, massive gears, chains, things that were designed to break rocks, not people.
And when they do use firearms, it's not a suppressed pistol. It's incredible high-caliber, deafening military weaponry.
And the brilliant thing Prashanth, the director, does here is that he ensures the physics of the action scenes actually reflect the literal weight of those objects.
This is so crucial. He doesn't speed up the film frame rate to make Prabhas, who plays Deva, look faster.
If anything, he emphasizes the slowness.
Yes. If Deva throws a punch or swings one of these massive iron broadswords, there is a visible, agonizing delay in the execution.
You literally see the wind-up. You see his boots dig into the dirt.
You see the sheer muscular effort it takes to hoist this slab of iron against gravity.
It's the visual representation of inertia.
Exactly. And because you are forced to sit through that agonizing windup, the explosive payoff when that weapon finally connects with the target is devastating.
It gives you, sitting in the audience, a tangible sense of mass and momentum.
You aren't marveling at his speed, you are terrified by his density.
But we have to ask why. Why make the action deliberately slower and heavier?
Because in a film where the lead character is famously stoic and speaks very few actual lines of dialogue, the violence is the dialogue.
Wait, let me stop you there because that's a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
The violence is the dialogue. How exactly are they speaking through these slow, heavy swings?
Well, think about what a specific fighting style communicates about a character's internal state.
Okay, like how?
A fast, flashy martial arts combination says, I am highly trained, I am efficient, and I am in a hurry.
Right. That makes sense.
But a slow, heavily planted, agonizingly deliberate swing of an iron broadsword that shatters a concrete pillar before it even hits the opponent.
That communicates something entirely different.
Exactly. That says, I have absolute unyielding resolve, I am inevitable, and I am carrying the crushing weight of an entire oppressed, slaughtered culture on my shoulders. The physical burden of the weapon literally represents a psychological burden of the character.
So if modern action, like John Wick, is a perfectly honed surgical scalpel, cutting with absolute precision and leaving clean edges,
Yeah.
Salaar 2 is essentially a rusted, jagged sledgehammer being dropped from the top of a skyscraper.
I like the sledgehammer analogy, but I would push back slightly on the idea that it's just raw, mindless, blunt force.
Oh, interesting. How so?
It's not a clumsy sledgehammer. It's a sledgehammer wielded by a religious zealot who knows exactly which load-bearing wall to hit to bring the entire building down.
Ah, okay. That's a great distinction.
There is an ancient, terrifying precision to it.
It's calculated devastation. And how does that change the way you physically feel watching it?
It changes everything.
Because watching a scalpel at work is thrilling, you know? You lean forward, your eyes dart around the screen. But watching a sledgehammer drop.
You feel that in your chest.
Right. You brace for the impact.
You absolutely do. It induces a kind of sympathetic exhaustion in the viewer. You fear the physical effort of the characters.
By slowing down the momentum and emphasizing the friction, the director grounds the fantasy of the action into a very gritty, painful reality.
The transfer of kinetic energy is completely visceral.
But to truly make the audience feel the full effect of that heavy metal impact over a 3-hour runtime, you have to have a master plan.
Oh, you can't just have guys swinging heavy iron for 3 hours straight.
Right. Without exhausting the audience into numbness anyway.
Yeah.
We have to look at how the director structurally scales these massive set pieces.
The architecture of the film's escalation is meticulous. Prashanth structures the primary conflict across 3 massive, distinct action set pieces.
And each one serves a very specific narrative purpose, right?
Yes. They don't just get bigger, they evolve.
So where do we start? Walk us through the first major collision.
The first major sequence is essentially the ambush at the Iron Gates. This is the audience's reintroduction to Diva's reality.
And it's a tightly wound, claustrophobic night battle.
Exactly. And crucially, the focus here isn't on massive armies clashing.
It's on highlighting Diva's stealth his raw survival instincts.
And his ability to turn the environment against a superior force. It's close quarters, it's dark, you can barely see the edges of the frame.
And the tension is incredibly high because the space is so restricted.
Right, it establishes the baseline. Then, the film radically expands the scope into the second major set piece.
The siege of the Shouryaanga Valley.
Yes, this is where the scale just breaks the ceiling.
We go from a claustrophobic, dirty skirmish in the dark to a sweeping, brightly lit, daytime tactical battlefield sequence.
And what's brilliant here is the stark visual and tactical contrast Neil sets up.
It's such a cool contrast.
He pits the modernized, mechanized infantry of the ruling Khanzar elite against the ancient, tribal, defensive formations of the Shouryangas.
We're talking heavy artillery and armored vehicles.
Yeah, coordinated military squads against massive iron shields, guerrilla traps, and religious fanaticism. It's a literal clash of eras.
It's the ultimate collision of the dystopian future and the ancient past within this world.
Truly.
You have these Shouryaanga warriors utilizing phalanx formations that look like they belong in a medieval epic, but they are deploying them against heavy machine gun fire.
It's visually spectacular.
It really is. But then we reach the climax. The third set piece, known as the Shattered Throne. And this is where my mind was blown by the structural choice.
This is where the director's restraint really shines, which honestly is an odd word to use for a movie this loud.
Right, restraint feels weird here.
But after giving you a massive, sprawling, explosive war sequence in the valley, the film does something entirely unexpected. It subtracts.
Yes. Instead of going even bigger, instead of having two massive armies crash into each other in the palace, it strips everything away.
It strips away the massive armies, it strips away the mechanized weapons, the tanks, the artillery.
The climax is a highly emotional, intensely localized, brutal duel.
It leaves only the raw, painful, unavoidable collision of the two former best friends.
The two brothers in arms, Deva and Varda.
Exactly.
I love that concept of brilliant subtraction. It's like, well, if you think of this three-act action structure as a symphony.
Oh, I like this.
You start with a very tense, claustrophobic solo instrument playing in the dark. That's the Iron Gates ambush. Then you bring in the massive, booming, overwhelming 100-piece orchestra for the daytime siege of the valley.
Yep.
And just when your ears are ringing and you expect the finale to be a deafening crescendo of every instrument playing at once, the orchestra drops out completely.
It's just silence and then...
Exactly. And you are left with an incredibly intimate, painful, heartbreaking duet.
A duet played with heavy iron broadswords where every strike is steeped in years of betrayal and broken brotherhood.
Perfectly said. But, you know, a symphony isn't just about the notes being played or even the instruments.
What do you mean?
It's about the acoustics of the concert hall. It's about the atmosphere.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
And in Salaar, too, the visual lighting and the operatic sound design are what actually make this heavy metal action feel so overwhelmingly oppressive to the senses.
They absolutely do.
If Dalar is swinging an iron broadsword with that much agonizing delay, you can't just light the scene like a slick, brightly colored Marvel movie.
No, the visual environment has to reflect that heavy, oppressive drag.
Which brings us directly to the technical mastery behind the film. Two key figures construct this sensory nightmare.
Bhuvan Gowda, the cinematographer, and Ravi Basrur, the composer and sound designer.
Their combined work is the foundational bedrock that allows this brutal action style to exist.
Let's look at Bhuvan Gowda's cinematography first. It is an absolute masterclass in high-contrast, anti-naturalistic lighting.
Anti-naturalistic is the perfect word. If you pause almost any frame of this movie, it doesn't look like the real world.
Not at all.
He uses natural light incredibly sparingly. Instead, the scenes are illuminated by very harsh, aggressive light sources.
We're talking torches cutting through the pitch black.
Yes, and the blinding, searing glare of molten iron splashing in the foundries.
And this suffocating midday sun that seems to have to physically fight its way through thick, polluted industrial smog just to hit the ground.
It creates these deep, completely impenetrable shadows within the frame. Whole sections of the screen are just swallowed by darkness.
And there is a vital thematic connection here. Those shadows aren't just an aesthetic choice to make things look cool or gritty.
They actively reflect the moral ambiguity of the entire cast of characters.
Because nobody in Khanzar is clean.
Exactly. There are no pure heroes here. Everyone operates in the moral gray, or just pitch black.
The visual design of having characters constantly half swallowed by shadow, their faces obscured by soot and smoke, perfectly mirrors the reality that they're all compromised.
And then you layer on Ravi Boswor's soundscape. The evolution of the audio from part 1 to part 2 is just as dramatic as the visual shift.
Oh, it's night and day. In Ceasefire, the sound design leaned heavily into electronic bass, synthesizers, and very modern, sharp metallic clangs.
It felt somewhat contemporary.
Right, reflecting the political maneuvering of the modern elites. But Shouryaanga Parvam dives headfirst into the ancient. Bosworth introduces this haunting, overwhelming orchestral choir.
The theme for the Shouryaanga tribe is unforgettable.
It really is.
It's backed by this deep, rhythmic, guttural throat singing and the relentless pounding of ancient war drums.
Throat singing inherently evokes a sense of deep time, of something primal and religious.
It sounds like an ancient, bloody ritual is being conjured every single time they march to war.
And the Foley work, the sound design of the action itself, is hyper-aggressive.
Every single time a blade is dropped, every time an armored engine revs, it carries an immense auditory thud.
It's mixed to rattle your ribcage, perfectly complementing that crushing weight of the choreography.
Okay, I have to be completely honest here, and I want to push back on this approach just a bit.
So go for it.
All this thick smog, the blinding molten iron, the shadows where you can't see the edges of the room, the deafening war drums and throat singing, it sounds absolutely exhausting.
It is.
At a certain point, aren't you just annoying the audience? If someone pays for a ticket to see an action epic and the director makes it physically difficult to see the fight or hear themselves think, isn't that just a failure of clear filmmaking?
That is a very common reaction.
Are we just making excuses for a messy movie by calling it atmospheric?
That is the exact risk Neil is taking, and it's a very valid criticism if you evaluate the film purely as pop entertainment.
Okay.
But the opacity is the point.
Sure.
By making the environment visually and acoustically oppressive, the director is intentionally denying you the comfort of a clear-cut, easily digestible action scene.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't supposed to have a God's eye view of clean choreography. You are being forced to exist in the same confusing, violent sensory overload that the characters are trapped in.
So we are deliberately being forced to peer through a moral fog.
Yes. Kanzarbi is a world that has corrupted everyone in it. It is suffocating them.
Right.
If the camera pulled back and lit everything perfectly with clean audio, it would be lying about the reality of the world.
Yeah.
The exhaustion you feel as a viewer is a sympathetic reflection of the character's reality.
That's a profound way to look at it, and it's a perfect segue into the characters themselves.
Yeah. Let's talk about Deva and Varda.
Because this visual and auditory darkness perfectly mirrors the internal darkness that is completely consuming the two main leads.
They aren't just fighting in this environment, they're being utterly mutated by it.
This is where the psychological vector of the film takes over. The heavy action and the brutal world directly inform the internal psychological shifts of these two men.
And the critical distinction to make here is that these characters don't just change because external bad things happen to them.
Right, it's deeper than that.
They change because their core illusions about themselves and their place in the world are completely shattered.
Let's look at Deva first. The contrast between his demeanor in Ceasefire and his metamorphosis in Shouryaanga Parvam is like night and day.
In part 1, Deva was a man expending an enormous amount of energy actively suppressing his own nature.
If you watch his physical performance, he has a slouching posture. He speaks slowly, reluctantly.
He deliberately avoids conflict, almost comically so at times.
But all of these were psychological coping mechanisms. He was desperately trying to lock away the monster he knew lived inside him.
He was a weapon, trying very hard to pretend it wasn't loaded.
Wow, yes. But in part 2, that submissive persona is completely discarded. He goes from being a dormant weapon to being a sovereign.
The physical performance shift by Prabhas is remarkable. His new body language tells the entire story.
He stands taller, his shoulders are squared.
He moves with a terrifying, lethal efficiency. He possesses the quiet, unshakable arrogance of a born ruler who has finally accepted his violent birthright.
And crucially, he becomes a strategist. He's no longer just a loyal attack dog hitting whatever target his friend Varda points at.
No, he is actively, intellectually dismantling an empire.
He's looking at the entire chessboard, manipulating the factions, and using the geography to his advantage.
Yes, he reclaims his agency. And on the tragic flip side of that evolution, you have Prithviraj Sukumaran's brilliant, heartbreaking portrayal of Varda.
Varda's arc is a masterpiece of tragedy. It is a terrifying study of absolute power and how deep, festering insecurity can corrupt a person's soul.
Let's contextualize him. In the first film, Varda was a surprisingly sympathetic figure.
He really was.
He was an exiled prince who fiercely loved his childhood friend Deva. He just wanted to reclaim his rightful birthright, to take his seat on the throne.
But the film asks a devastating question.
What actually happens to your psyche when you finally get the throne, but you know you didn't win it yourself?
Right. It explores the psychological poison that infect them. He achieves his ultimate goal. He sits on the throne of Kansar.
And slowly realizes that every single lord who bows to him is actually looking right past him, at Deva standing in the shadows.
They fear Deva. They respect Deva. Varda realizes that Deva is the real power.
It is entirely emasculating. And compounding that insecurity is the ghost of his father, Raja Manar.
The patriarchal expectation placed on Varda is crushing.
His father built this empire through ruthless dominance, and Varda realizes he is ruling through proxy. This drives him into absolute paranoia.
The slow realization that he can never truly rule, he can never truly be the king as long as his best friend exists.
It breaks him.
The way Prithviraj handles this descent is chilling. He can shift from genuine brotherly warmth to stone-cold malice within a single flicker of his eyes in the same scene.
The tragedy is that neither man wanted this conflict, but their natures and the rules of Kansar made it inevitable.
So Deva's physical transformation is like a massive, tightly coiled industrial spring that has been held down for years.
That's exactly it.
When it's finally released, it is massively destructive, but it's finally doing exactly what it was engineered to do.
Yeah.
While Varda's arc is like a man who fought through hell his entire life to win a golden crown, only to put it on his head and realize the metal is lined with a slow-acting poison that is driving him insane.
Those are incredibly apt ways to conceptualize their arcs. They capture the emotional devastation that fuels all of this heavy metal action we've been discussing.
The sledgehammers are heavy, but the emotional baggage is heavier.
Absolutely.
But listen, we need to be realistic about what this movie is. This uncompromising blend of incredibly heavy, slow action, pitch-black visuals, deafening sound design, and deep psychology. It's a lot.
It creates something entirely unique. It might even be a masterpiece of the action tragedy genre. But it is absolutely not an easy watch.
No, it demands a monumental amount of effort from its audience.
It does. It requires patience, attention, and a strong stomach.
And if we evaluate the film objectively, we have to look at the cost of having such an uncompromising singular vision.
Because there are costs.
There are structural triumphs, for sure, but there are also significant creative hurdles that will alienate a large portion of the audience.
Let's start with the triumphs, because when this movie hits, it hits like a freight train.
Oh, yeah.
The first major triumph is the flawless tone consistency. There is absolutely no commercial pandering here.
Which is incredibly rare for a film with a budget this massive.
Yeah.
Usually, studios mandate a 4-quadrant approach.
Right. You expect sudden, forced comic relief characters to pop up, or a distracting romantic subplot to lighten the mood so the audience can catch their breath. But none of that exists in Salaar 2. It is dark, grim, and mature from the opening frame to the closing credits. It respects its own stakes.
It also delivers incredibly satisfying narrative payoffs. All those intricate, sometimes confusing mysteries set up in Part 1 regarding the tribes and historical betrayals.
They are paid off with massive, violent revelations.
And we can't ignore the elite subtext. The film operates as a grand allegory of how empires inevitably collapse under the sheer weight of their own internal discrimination.
The caste system Kansar built to subjugate the borderlands is the exact mechanism Deva uses to tear it down.
It's poetic. But then we have the hurdles, the barriers to entry, and the first massive one is the exposition overload right at the beginning of the film.
The first 30 to 40 minutes are incredibly dense.
So dense.
To set up this complex tribal holy war, the film requires the audience to do immense mental heavy lifting right out of the gate.
If you aren't paying attention, you will be completely lost.
Yeah, you have to map out a dizzying array of historical flashbacks, decipher complex clan relationships.
Understand the specific hierarchy of the Kansar lords, and track decades-old tribal politics before the real narrative engine of the present day even starts moving.
It can be totally overwhelming for someone just looking for an action movie.
And as a consequence of that density, because the film eventually has to narrow its focus so intensely onto the intimate conflict between Deva and Varda.
Some of the more interesting political sublords and side characters we met in Part 1 get sidelined or abruptly dispatched.
Right, the world shrinks to just these two men.
But the biggest hurdle, and this ties back into everything we've talked about regarding the style of the film, is what's been termed sensory fatigue, or pacing exhaustion.
It is a very real phenomenon when watching this film.
It really is.
We spent all this time talking about the brilliance of the heavy metal action, the anti-naturalistic high-contrast visuals, the aggressive thudding sound design.
But the reality is, the sheer volume of these high-decibel, incredibly heavy action blocks can physically and mentally exhaust viewers.
If you aren't accustomed to this highly specific, relentlessly aggressive genre, you might just tap out halfway through.
When every single punch is framed and mixed to sound like a sledgehammer hitting a concrete wall, eventually the audience's nervous system feels the bruising.
You become numb to the impact if you aren't emotionally invested.
Exactly.
So this brings me back to the challenge I posed earlier, but on a grander scale.
Okay, let's hear it.
Based on everything we've unpacked, the director's philosophy of weight, the structural dialogue of the violence, the moral fog of the cinematography, is this sensory fatigue actually a flaw of the movie?
That's the big question.
Or is it a deliberate, calculated, almost hostile choice by Prashanth Neil? By making the action feel like a physically exhausting 3-hour thud that wears you down to your bones, is he intentionally forcing you, the audience, to bear the crushing weight of Khanzar right alongside Diva and Barda?
If we connect all the narrative, visual, and auditory dots we've discussed today, I believe it is absolutely deliberate.
Do you think so?
I do. You cannot tell an honest story about a suffocating, oppressive, blood-soaked culture without making the viewing experience itself somewhat oppressive and suffocating.
That makes a lot of sense.
The exhaustion isn't a bug, it's the feature. You are supposed to leave the theater feeling the phantom weight of the iron broadsword in your own hands. You are supposed to feel tired.
That completely recontextualizes how you judge a movie like this. It's not trying to thrill you, it's trying to burden you.
Exactly.
And that brings us to our final verdict on where this monumental, difficult, brilliant film stands in the larger landscape of cinema.
To summarize everything we've explored, Salaar, Part 2, Shouryaanga Parvam, is a towering testament to what happens when a filmmaker absolutely refuses to dilute their cinematic vision for the sake of mass accessibility.
It's so uncompromising.
It successfully blends ancient, feudal tribal politics with a hyper-stylized, modern dystopian aesthetic. It completely rejects the frictionless agility of modern blockbusters, favoring a brutal choreography of heavy metal.
It masters the action tragedy genre, and in doing so, leaves an indelible, heavy mark on Indian cinema. It is a cinematic storm of blood, rusted iron, and broken promises. It demands your attention, it exhausts your senses, and it breaks your heart.
It really does.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final haunting thought I want to leave you with. Something to mull over on your own long after you've experienced the film.
What is it?
The story presents this incredible, violent allegory about empires collapsing under the weight of their own internal discrimination and hubris.
Right.
But it leaves you with a deeply unsettling question. If an empire is inherently corrupt to its very foundations, and it is overthrown by a man wielding an archaic, brutal, and utterly uncompromising holy violence,
Can the new reign ever truly escape the shadows?
exactly. Or is it just the exact same crushing weight, the same blood currency operating under a different flag?
That is a powerful, lingering question to end on. It's the ultimate tragedy of revolution.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the darkness of Khanzar. As always, stay curious. Have you ever sat down to watch one of those massive cinematic blockbusters and with minutes, you don't just see the fictional world on screen, you actually feel it?
Oh yeah, like the physical weight of it.
Exactly. The physical crushing weight of it. And I'm not talking about, the scale of the explosions or the size of the CGI armies.
Right. Not the spectacle part.
Yeah, not the spectacle. I mean, you can practically feel the history buried in the dirt the characters are walking on. You know?
Absolutely.
Like you can feel the density of the buildings, the rust flaking off the metal, all those centuries of secrets just compacted into the ground beneath their feet.
It's rare. It's really rare.
It is. But when a film pulls it off, it stops being a movie, I think. It starts feeling like an unearthed archaeological site. You almost want to wash your hands after watching it because the grit feels that real.
Yeah, it creates a very specific kind of sensory immersion because you aren't just an observer looking at a polished green screen anymore.
Right. You're in it.
You become a witness to a lived-in, decaying reality. The environment itself basically becomes the loudest, most overbearing character in the room.
Yeah, the loudest character by far.
And, achieving that level of tactile world building requires just an absolute obsession with physical detail.
Which perfectly brings us to our focus today. So for you listening, we are immersing ourselves in an incredibly dense 20-minute conceptual analysis of the film Salaar, Part 2, Shouryaanga Parvam.
Such a massive piece of work.
It really is a massive cinematic event. And if you're familiar with it, you know the immediate temptation is to just sit down and list off the screenplay beats, right?
Well, for sure. This guy punched this guy.
Exactly. To just say, this person fought this person, then this city was attacked, then there was a massive twist. But we are bypassing that.
Yeah, we're skipping the standard surface-level action movie review today.
We really are. Instead, we're looking at the very bedrock of this story. We're doing a deep dive into the mechanics of the industrial design, the way historical trauma operates as an actual narrative engine.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
So fascinating. And we're also looking at the complex economics of high-stakes world building.
Setting the stage for this requires us to fundamentally rethink what director Prashanth is doing here. I mean, he isn't just pointing a camera at a generic action set piece.
Not at all.
He is crafting a tactile, completely physical universe known as Kansar. And it is a place of heavy infrastructure, massive machinery, profound industrial grime.
Yeah, you can practically smell the oil.
Right. But the brilliance we really need to explore today is how the physical decay of these incredible sets is entirely tethered to the psychological decay of the characters inhabiting them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to truly understand the sheer scale of the conflict happening between these characters, we first have to literally look at the ground they're standing on.
Literally, the physical ground.
Right. There is this massive textural shift that happens as we transition into the second part of the story. And it's not just like a wardrobe change,
No, it's a complete architectural revelation.
Exactly. We have to look at the transition from carbon to stone.
And that visual evolution is just striking. If you recall the first part of this epic,
Oh, yeah.
the visual design was heavily reliant on carbon-based aesthetics. You were looking at coal dust, wet asphalt, dark, slick surfaces.
Diesel fumes everywhere.
Diesel fumes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It gave the setting an incredibly bleak, highly functional look. It felt like a modern, albeit dystopian industrial nightmare.
It really did.
The wealth of Kansar felt tangible, powered by continuous burning energy.
Yeah, it felt like a refinery. Everything was built for extraction and profit.
Right.
But in Shouryaanga Parvam, that texture shifts dramatically. We move completely away from those sleek, carbon-heavy, modern industrial environments.
Very deliberate pivot.
It is. Instead, the imagery becomes dominated by corroded iron and raw, unpolished stone. We are visually descending into ancient, buried tribal architecture.
It's such a visceral shift.
Yeah, we're moving from diesel and dust down into rust and ancient rock. It's like the movie is literally digging downward into the earth.
Well, the production design is deliberately telling us something there. It's saying that the modern weapons, the industrial refineries, the immense wealth of Kansar,
The whole modern setup.
the whole modern setup, it's all just a facade. It is a thin, fragile layer of modernity poured over something incredibly ancient and profoundly violent.
Wow.
The modern infrastructure is essentially a lie that the city tells itself to feign civilization.
I was thinking about the mechanics of this shift, and it reminds me of building a massive state-of-the-art skyscraper.
Okay, I like that.
Like, you can hire the best architects, use the sleekest glass, the strongest polished concrete, and build this gleaming monument to modern wealth.
Sure.
But if you build that skyscraper directly on top of an active geological fault line, all that modern engineering doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter at all.
Right. The tectonic plates underneath are older, they're heavier, and they're completely indifferent to your concrete. When that underlying rock shifts, the modern glass shatters.
That is exactly what this visual shift represents.
Right. The characters are suddenly realizing that their modern political disputes are happening on top of a massive ancient fault line that is finally starting to rupture.
That geological comparison hits the nail on the head because it explains the causality of the collapse. You cannot simply cover up generational trauma with infrastructure and expect it to stay buried.
It's going to come up eventually.
Always. The underlying pressure of that unresolved history will inevitably crack the pavement. And by shifting the visual focus to raw stone and corroded iron, the film physically exposes that underlying pressure.
It makes it visible.
Exactly. The hum of the refineries is replaced by the suffocating weight of the crypt.
But, I mean, I do have to push back a little bit on this aesthetic choice, or at least play devil's advocate for the viewer's experience here.
Go for it.
If a director relies so heavily on this suffocating atmosphere of grime, rust, and raw stone for hours on end, doesn't that run the risk of becoming visually exhausting?
Oh, it definitely is exhausting.
Right. I mean, when every single frame is suffocatingly heavy, when there is no visual relief anywhere, does it start to numb the audience? You're basically asking people to stare at a collapsing fault line for 3 hours.
Yeah, that risk of visual fatigue is absolutely inherent in this kind of uncompromising world building. Constant visual weight demands a lot from a viewer.
That's a big ask.
It is a big ask. However, the visual decay is non-negotiable here because it directly supports the core theme of the narrative. The exhaustion you feel as a viewer is, in many ways, the intended empathetic response to what the characters are experiencing.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, the environment is oppressive because the history of Kanzar is oppressive.
So the exhaustion is a feature, not a bug.
Precisely the opposite of a flaw, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a structural necessity. The visual heaviness of the raw stone isn't just set dressing.
It's not just to look cool.
No, it is the physical manifestation of an inescapable past. The film forces you to feel the suffocation of a society that has built its wealth on top of a slaughter.
Right.
If the environment were easy to look at, if it gave you visual breathing room, it would fundamentally undermine the horror of what that stone represents. You are supposed to feel trapped in it, just as the characters are.
It's forcing you to breathe the dust of their history. And that transition, that inescapable corrosion, it isn't just in the walls of Kanzar, right?
Oh no, it permeates everything.
Everything. This rot, this ancient weight, extends directly into the tools of war the characters are holding in their hands.
That's a great point.
The environment is actually shaping the combat itself, which brings us to the arsenal of ideology.
Yeah, because the weaponry in this film ceases to be just props. The arsenal becomes deeply philosophical.
Philosophical weapons, I love that.
It's true. The choice of firearms versus blades highlights a massive, widening emotional gap between our two central figures, Varda and Deva.
Who were once, like, the closest of friends.
Exactly. So let's look at the mechanics of Varda's power first.
Yeah, let's do that. Because Varda's institutional authority is essentially a machine. His military force is entirely reliant on modern, mass-produced, automatic weaponry and heavy armored vehicles.
It's very sterile.
Very sterile. If you look at his forces, everything is uniform. Everything is mechanized. It's the aesthetic of a modern nation-state enforcing its will through overwhelming standardized firepower.
All right. It's an assembly line of violence.
Yes, it's clean, in a coldly militaristic sense. You pull a trigger from 50 yards away and the problem is solved.
And that uniformity is incredibly symbolic. Varda's mechanical gear represents his reliance on institutional authority.
He's hiding behind it.
He absolutely is. He is using the detached machinery of the state to protect a rule that he knows, deep down, is fundamentally fragile.
Yeah.
Think about the nature of a mass-produced assault rifle. It removes the individual from the act of violence. It turns killing into a bureaucratic function, like you said, an assembly line of force.
A completely impersonal act.
Right. Varda is hiding behind the armor of an institution because facing the reality of his power is just too painful.
He is using the machinery to put distance between himself and the violence. But then you look across the battlefield at Deva.
Oh, completely different story.
Completely different universe. Deva's insurgency is the exact opposite of bureaucratic. Deva and his forces utilize heavy, hand-forged, oversized ancestral blades.
The physicality of it is intense.
It is. They are using modified industrial tools. Wrenches, hammers, mining equipment turned into instruments of war. They are not hiding behind sniper rifles or armored glass.
No, they're right in the mud. Every single strike from Deva feels heavy, intimate, and deeply personalized.
Yeah, you feel the exertion.
He isn't fighting a detached mechanical war. He is fighting a deeply physical, historical war. While Varda relies on the mechanics of the present, Deva is wielding the ancestry of the past.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If we step back and think about a realistic combat scenario, how does an insurgency using modified industrial tools and massive ancient swords actually impact a modern, mechanized army psychologically?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because on paper, the guys with the automatic weapons and the armored trucks should win every single time. It shouldn't even be a contest, right?
The math says they win.
Exactly. The physics of it dictate that the bullets win. But there is something deeply terrifying about an enemy that refuses to play by the modern rules of engagement.
Oh, the psychological impact on a standardized army is devastating.
Yeah.
And it goes right back to the economics of world building we mentioned at the start of this deep dive.
Right. How power is distributed.
Exactly. How is power distributed and how is it challenged? A modern mechanized army operates on the assumption of supremacy through technology.
They think they're untouchable.
Right. They believe that their mass-produced bullets render individual strength irrelevant. It's a comforting thought for a soldier. The weapon does the work.
I just pull the trigger.
I pull the trigger, I'm safe. But when they are confronted by an insurgency that absorbs those bullets, that utilizes the raw terrain, and continues to advance with hand-forged, oversized blades, it completely shatters the psychological safety net of the institution.
It breaks the math of modern warfare.
It really does.
The soldiers in Varda's army are doing the calculus, I have a machine gun, he has a wrench, I'm safe.
Right.
But when the guy with the wrench keeps coming, the calculus fails and panic sets in.
Because a bullet from a distance is a statistic. A massive ancestral blade swung at close range is a judgment.
Ooh, a bullet is a statistic, a blade is a judgment. That's powerful.
It is the fundamental difference in their warfare. Varda's soldiers are fighting for a paycheck and the maintenance of an institution.
Yeah, they're employees, basically.
Exactly. Diva's forces are fighting with the weight of history in their hands. The subtext of the weaponry shows us that Varda's power is wide, but shallow. It's just machinery.
While Diva's power is concentrated.
Concentrated and deeply rooted in the very stone of Kanzar.
That distinction, the industrial tools they use, symbolize how the foundational working class, the forgotten history of the city, is rising up to dismantle the sleek, modern political structure built on top of them. It's just brilliant.
It's incredibly layered storytelling.
A bullet is a statistic, a blade is a judgment. I want to let that resonate for a second for you listening, because to truly understand why Diva is delivering that judgment, why he is fighting with such a personalized ancestral fury, we have to dig even deeper.
We have to go to the root of it.
We do. We have to look at the bloody history that those raw stone walls are hiding. Because no one picks up a hand-forged ancestral sword unless the history absolutely demands it.
Right, which brings us to the narrative engine of generational trauma. And, the movie could have easily taken the lazy route here.
Oh, for sure. So many movies do.
It could have just said, our heroes had a falling out over a misunderstanding or a power grab.
It's a standard buddy-turned-enemy plot.
Yeah. Exactly. But instead, the emotional heart of this second part rests on the meticulous, agonizing documentation of a specific historical atrocity, the 1985 genocide.
And director Prashanth does not treat this as a standard throwaway exposition dump.
No, he forces you to sit with it.
He really does. You know how some movies handle backstory, right? A character stares out a rainy window, we get a blurry 30-second flashback of a village burning, a single tear rolls down their cheek, and then boom, we are back to the present-day car chases.
Right, checking the backstory box.
Exactly. That is not what happens here. This genocide is framed as a dark, intense, historical drama operating entirely inside the larger film. It demands your full, undivided attention.
It demands your attention because understanding the mechanics of the atrocity is essential to understanding everything happening in the present.
Everything stems from it.
The film takes the time to illustrate the exact mechanisms of the massacre. It isn't just a spontaneous riot or a sudden clash of armies on a battlefield.
No, it was planned.
It is a calculated, methodical, political extermination. The Mannar clan Varda's ancestors didn't just attack the Shouryangas on an open battlefield. They used a false treaty to systematically wipe them out.
A false treaty.
They weaponized the promise of peace.
That specific mechanism, the weaponization of a treaty, is incredibly chilling. I mean, it makes me think about the psychology required to execute something like that.
It's deeply cynical.
It is. You invite your enemy to the table under the sacred banner of negotiation. You ask them to lower their defenses, to disarm, to trust in a shared peaceful future.
Right, you play on their hope.
You play on their hope, you go through the motions of diplomacy, maybe you even break bread with them. And then, while they are seating in the chairs you provided, reading the documents you drafted, you slaughter them.
It is the ultimate violation of human trust.
It really is. The devastation of a false treaty goes far beyond the immediate loss of life, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It destroys the very concept of future peace. When an institution uses diplomacy as a trap, they are burning the bridge of trust for generations.
It reminds me of real-world geopolitical history, actually, where armistices and diplomatic summits have been used as elaborate traps.
Sadly, yeah, there's a lot of historical precedent for that.
Right. And when a film introduces that level of sophisticated, cynical, political maneuvering beneath the surface of a blockbuster action movie, it makes you realize you aren't just watching a revenge thriller anymore.
No, it's way bigger than that.
You are watching a deep political tragedy unfold. The violence isn't just physical, it's systemic.
What's fascinating here is how detailing the exact mechanics of this false treaty fundamentally shifts the narrative tone of everything that follows.
How so?
Well, consider how a standard action movie works. An audience gets a vague backstory of violence, and the protagonist's quest in the present day usually just looks like a simple individual revenge plot.
Right. You killed my family, now I kill yours.
Exactly. It's a very familiar, almost comforting cinematic trope. We know how to digest revenge.
You've seen it a million times.
But by showing us the cold, bureaucratic calculation of the false treaty, the film elevates Deva's actions entirely out of the realm of personal vendetta.
It changes the entire scale of his motivation. He isn't just an angry guy getting payback for his specific family.
Not at all. The violence Deva enacts in the present is reframed as an inevitable historical correction.
A historical correction. Wow.
Because the Manar clan fundamentally broke the moral universe of Khansar when they weaponized the peace treaty. They disrupted the natural balance through an unforgivable deception.
Right.
Therefore, Deva is the physical manifestation of karma returning to the city. He is the raw stone of the past rising up to crush the modern institution that was built on a lie.
He is a historical correction. That completely recontextualizes every swing of that massive blade. It's not murder. It's an audit of their sin.
An audit of their sins. That's exactly it.
But, while this historical correction is what drives Deva relentlessly forward, we cannot ignore the other side of this coin. Because that exact same history is actively destroying his former best friend, Varda, from the inside out.
Yeah, we have to examine Varda's paradox here.
Yes, because the psychological toll of the 1985 genocide is just a masterclass in writing collateral damage.
It really is. It doesn't just radicalize the survivors like Deva, it deeply fractures the inheritors of the perpetrators.
That's the key. Varda is a man slowly being crushed under the weight of ancestral guilt.
Yeah.
He is forced to carry the incredibly dark legacy of his father, Rajma Manar, even though he didn't write the treaty himself,
Right, he wasn't the architect, but he inherits the building.
Let's break down Varda's impossible situation because it is a brilliantly constructed paradox. Varda spent the entire first part of this epic fighting tooth and nail to claim the throne.
He risked everything for it.
He did. He wanted to rule, he wanted to bring his own vision to Khansar, and he heavily relied on Deva to help him secure that power.
They were inseparable.
But now, in the harsh light of this uncovered history, he realizes that the very throne he fought so hard to sit on was built on a historic crime.
It is fundamentally illegitimate.
Exactly. He is trapped in a logical and moral inescapable corner.
He really is. Because if he acknowledges the truth of the false treaty and openly condemns his own father's actions, he instantly destroys his own legitimacy.
Right.
He admits that his entire rule, his entire identity as a leader, and the power structure he commands is based on a foundational lie.
He would basically be firing himself and dismantling his own kingdom.
Precisely. But if he chooses the alternative, if he chooses to defend the throne, protect his kingdom, and maintain stability, he must silence the past.
And in Khansar, the past isn't a book, it's a person.
Exactly. The only way to silence the past is to eliminate the physical embodiment of it. His best friend, Deva.
I have to ask you, looking at this dynamic and thinking about leadership in general, can a leader ever truly govern in peace if their authority is derived entirely from an atrocity that they didn't commit themselves but that they actively benefit from?
It's a profound question.
I mean, think about that for a second. Varda didn't sign the false treaty in 1985. He wasn't the architect of the genocide. He might even personally abhor what his father did.
Right, he might hate it.
But he wears the crown that the genocide paid for. Can a person in that position ever find stability, or are they doomed from the moment they sit on the throne?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, history and psychology tell us they are usually doomed.
Doomed.
Yeah. And not always by external revolutionary forces, but by internal psychological collapse. A leader in that position is perpetually fighting ghosts.
Fighting ghosts.
You cannot govern in peace when the foundation of your power requires constant active denial of reality. The cognitive dissonance requires so much mental energy to maintain that it basically rots the mind.
It's exhausting.
It is. And this is exactly why Varda is driven into a state of deep, crippling paranoia.
The paranoia of the illegitimate king. It's like a virus that infects every single decision he makes.
Exactly. When you know your throne is stolen, you suspect everyone of trying to steal it back.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Every shadow looks like an assassin. Every whisper in the hallway sounds like a conspiracy.
Right.
And suddenly, Varda's reliance on that massive, mechanized army we discussed earlier, it makes perfect sense in a new light.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
It isn't just a tactical military choice. It is a desperate symptom of his paranoia. He surrounds himself with machines because machines don't know history.
Wow, machines don't judge you.
Exactly. Machines don't judge you for your father's sins. He can no longer trust human loyalty because human loyalty is complicated by morality.
That is a staggering realization. He trusts the uniform because he can't trust the man wearing it.
Precisely.
The film brilliantly demonstrates that while the territorial battles in Khanzar are massive, I mean, they are fighting over enormous tracts of land and infrastructure, the highest stakes are deeply psychological.
The real war is in his head.
Yes. The true war is happening inside Varda's mind as he watches his own morality erode in real time just to protect a crown he knows he doesn't deserve.
It is a devastating character arc. It's the tragedy of a man who realizes too late that the prize he fought his whole life for is actually a curse.
Right. So we have this immense historical trauma firmly established. We have these two former brothers on opposite sides of a deeply personal, deeply ideological divide.
The board is set.
The psychological lines are etched into the stone, literally. But as a piece of cinema, the movie now has a massive logistical problem to solve, right?
Oh, yeah.
The director has to figure out how to physically execute this gigantic civil war without the narrative collapsing under the sheer weight of its own setup.
Managing the pacing of the second half of a massive, pre-established epic is incredibly difficult.
I can imagine.
You know, you are no longer launching a brand new world. You are paying off the massive promises made in the first installment. The audience has been patient, and now they expect delivery.
They want the payoff.
Exactly. It requires a completely different pacing strategy, and Prashanth Neel utilizes a masterstroke of structural engineering here. He ruthlessly strips away the setup.
Because the first film did all the heavy lifting for us.
It did.
I mean, if you think back to part one, it spent hours meticulously establishing the political hierarchy of Khanzar. We had to learn the names of the different tribes, the complex voting blocks, the territorial boundaries, the specific rules of succession.
There's a lot of data to process.
It was. We essentially took a master class in the geopolitics of this fictional world. So when the sequel begins, the director makes the conscious decision not to hold our hand anymore. It hits the ground running at an absolute sprint.
And that structural shift is a fluid storytelling triumph.
It really works.
The script immediately pivots away from slow exposition and dives straight into an active, multi-front civil war. There is a ruthlessness to the editing and the narrative choices that is highly effective.
Yeah, it doesn't linger on anything unnecessary.
No, the film drops unnecessary subplots that might have bogged it down in political minutia, choosing instead to maintain a lean, relentlessly fast-paced ride. It jumps rapidly between different front lines, moving across the war-torn landscape without ever losing track of the central characters.
And let's marvel at the sheer structural balance of power at play here, too. The contrast in scale is absolutely dizzying.
It is huge.
On one hand, you have these massive, wide-angle military blockades. We are talking about armies clashing over immense iron border gates, thousands of soldiers, armored columns, massive artillery strikes, a scale of conflict that feels almost mythic.
Like something out of an ancient legend, but with tanks.
Exactly. It's the kind of massive cinematic warfare that just takes over the entire screen. But amidst all of this deafening cacophony, what does the camera do?
It exhibits remarkable restraint. And this is the hallmark of a director who understands that spectacle without emotional anchoring is just noise.
Yeah, it's just explosions otherwise.
Right. No matter how large the battle over the Iron Gates gets, no matter how many explosions rock the frame or how many extras are fighting in the background, the camera always, inevitably, returns to the breaking emotional bond between Deva and Varda.
It constantly zooms back in on the heartbreak. It refuses to let you forget why they're fighting.
It has to. Because if you lose the human core, the audience stops caring about who controls the Iron Gates.
Who cares about a gate?
Exactly. A gate is just metal. A friendship is something the audience can feel. The grand structural balance is achieved by making the macro conflict of the Civil War a direct mirror of the micro conflict between the two friends.
I love that.
Every time a bridge falls or a massive fortress is breached on screen, it is visually representing a new, irreparable fracture in their relationship. The restraint ensures that the human tragedy remains the loudest, most impactful element amidst the deafening spectacle of war.
It's intimacy disguised as an epic.
Beautifully said.
So, taking a step back from the story itself, we have to look at the film as a complete package. How does this ambitious, trauma-fueled, rust-covered architecture actually hold up as a cinematic experience?
Let's assess it.
Yeah, this brings us to a clear-eyed final assessment of the film's triumphs, its vulnerabilities, and some incredibly fascinating off-screen context.
Right. Well, the critical assessment of its execution is incredibly strong. First and foremost, the uncompromising visual style is celebrated as a major triumph.
We talked about that a lot.
And we discussed the dark, heavy aesthetic, the raw stone and corroded iron. By leaning fully into this, the movie actively bucks the bright, highly saturated, visually safe trends of traditional commercial cinema.
It doesn't look like a Marvel movie.
No, not at all. It demands to be taken seriously on its own dark visual terms, and it succeeds in creating a distinct, unforgettable look. You won't mistake Khanzar for any other cinematic universe.
Definitely not. And that visual style is anchored by deeply layered character writing.
That's crucial.
This isn't a cartoon where the good guys wear white and the bad guys wear black. It completely avoids the simple binary good versus evil tropes that plague so many action movies.
Right.
Varda isn't just a mustache-twirling villain out for world domination. He is a tragic figure crushed by his father's sins, desperately trying to survive his own paranoia.
And Deva isn't a saint either.
No, Deva isn't a flawless, righteous knight. He is a man consumed by historical rage, executing a bloody, terrifying judgment. They are complex, multi-dimensional figures driven by contradictory impulses of loyalty, deep guilt, and raw survival.
And the performances that bring these complexities to life are essential to the film's success.
Oh, the acting is phenomenal.
Prabhas and Prithviraj Sukumaran deliver exceptional, highly nuanced performances. In a movie filled with massive weapons, thousands of extras, and booming sound design, the lead actors anchor the film with quiet, simmering intensity.
They don't have to shout to be heard.
Exactly. They let the silence between the dialogue carry the weight of their shattered brotherhood. Combined with the flawless pacing execution we discussed, dropping the exposition for a lean, multi-front war, it creates a highly effective piece of action tragedy storytelling.
But as with any incredibly ambitious piece of art, there are vulnerabilities, right?
Always.
It's not a perfect experience for everyone. A major point of critique is that this movie is emphatically not an easy watch for a casual viewer.
Oh, it's definitely not.
It has what is described as high narrative density. It demands that you not only watched part one, but that you deeply understood and remembered the complex tribal history, the specific rules of Khanzar, and the convoluted political alliances.
There was a very steep learning curve.
Very steep. If you walk into this theater on a Friday night hoping for a light, turn-your-brain-off popcorn flick, you are going to hit a massive brick wall of dense mythology.
That narrative density is absolutely a double-edged sword. It rewards the dedicated, attentive viewer with profound depth and a massive payoff, but it can easily alienate the casual audience member who just wants to see the hero win some fights and save the day.
So what does this all mean for the audience's actual physical experience sitting in the theater?
Well,
Because another major vulnerability mentioned is the sensory intensity of the film. We are talking about the constant, unrelenting combination of those dark, heavy visuals, rapid action cuts, and a booming, incredibly bass-heavy sound design.
it hits you right in the chest.
Over a long runtime, that can feel incredibly overwhelming, which leads me to ask, is a movie still considered a success if it physically exhausts its audience by the time the credits finally roll?
That's a fair question.
If people are walking out feeling drained instead of energized, did the movie work?
This raises an important question about the fundamental purpose of cinema, doesn't it? Is the goal always to entertain, to uplift, and to provide escapism? Or is there room for art that actively drains you in order to make you feel the absolute weight of its subject matter?
Right. Does it have to be fun?
Exactly. In the context of a film dealing with historical genocide, weaponized peace treaties, and deep, inescapable psychological trauma, I would argue that exhausting the audience is actually a primary marker of success.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you leave a movie about the devastating cycle of generational violence feeling light, bouncy, and refreshed, the film has failed to communicate its core truth.
It would be intellectually dishonest for the movie to make you feel good.
Exactly the point. The sensory intensity is the vehicle for the emotional truth. You are meant to feel the auditory and visual assault, just as the characters feel the historical assault on their lives.
You are supposed to feel the physical weight of the stone on your own shoulders.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most mind-blowing piece of this puzzle.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
To fully appreciate the monumental effort required to construct this exhausting, immersive world, we have to look at the vital off-screen context provided by the Salaar 2 story and shooting update analysis. This completely shifts our perspective from the fictional world to the real world.
The real-world logistics behind creating a fictional world of this magnitude are just staggering.
Incredible.
This update analysis provides a comprehensive breakdown of the immense filming schedules, the timeline shifts, and the colossal industrial undertaking required by the production team. Bringing Kanzar back to the big screen wasn't just a matter of turning the cameras back on. It was a massive logistical nightmare.
Let's talk about the mechanics of that undertaking, because think about what we've discussed. The transition from carbon to stone, the massive iron gates, the intricate weaponry. To make that real on screen, the production team had to meticulously reconstruct these massive, sprawling physical sets.
They literally built a city.
They are dealing with thousands of tons of material to create that tactile reality we praised earlier. And they have to do this while navigating the scheduling conflicts of massive Indian cinema stars, coordinating thousands of extras, and managing a crew in what is essentially a fabricated, heavy industry worksite.
The physical toll on a crew working in a high-dust, heavy metal environment, even a fabricated one, is immense.
Oh, is that?
But beyond the physical logistics, the analysis highlights the intense creative pressure. Prashanth had the unenviable task of delivering a sequel that needed to scale up in physical spectacle, the multi-front civil war, while simultaneously scaling down into deeply intimate, claustrophobic psychological trauma.
That is a tough tightrope to walk.
Extremely tough. Balancing those two extremes on a day-to-day shooting schedule requires immense directorial control.
Understanding this off-screen reality profoundly contextualizes the sheer ambition of the project. It reminds us that building a fictional world of this density, a world that feels so real it exhausts you, requires a real-world army of artists, technicians, sound designers, and laborers operating at the absolute peak of their craft.
It's an industrial effort to build an industrial nightmare.
It takes an industrial effort to build an industrial nightmare. I love that.
It's a fascinating parallel, too.
How so?
The immense labor required to build the real-world sets mirrors the immense labor it took the characters to build the fictional city of Kanzar. Both are monuments to human effort, though one is built for art and the other for power.
That parallel perfectly brings us full circle, because whether we are analyzing the real-world logistics of a massive film set, diving into the fictional, rust-covered politics of a city like Kanzar, or even looking at our own real-world political landscapes, the fundamental lesson remains the same.
It does.
For you listening, the takeaway is this. You can never truly understand a conflict just by looking at the weapons currently being fired on the surface. You have to look at the bedrock beneath them.
We have to dig.
You have to understand the hidden history, the broken treaties, the buried betrayals, and the unseen architecture of the world that allowed those weapons to be forged in the first place. If you only look at the bullets, you miss the tragedy.
The surface is always just a symptom. The disease is always in the foundation.
Wow.
And if we take everything we've unpacked today, the transition from modern carbon to ancient stone, the devastating weaponization of peace, the crushing, paralyzing weight of ancestral guilt, it leaves us with a lingering, deeply unsettling question about the nature of these structures.
What's that?
Well, if physical environments, like the raw stone and corroded iron of Kanzar, actually hold the memory of historical atrocities, what happens when those structures eventually crumble? As Kanzar inevitably falls apart under the weight of this civil war, does the trauma finally dissipate into the air, freeing the next generation? Or does it seep further down into the earth, poisoning the soil for whatever comes next?
That is heavy.
Can a society ever truly heal its generational trauma? Or, just like building a new, sleek city over ancient ruins, are we doomed to just pour new concrete over the old blood, waiting for the day it inevitably cracks again? Imagine just for a second, being like the ultimate protector.
Okay.
You know, you are this unstoppable force, this total monolith of strength, and your entire life's purpose is just dedicated to shielding the people you love.
Right, like your whole identity is built around being this impenetrable wall.
Exactly. But then you wake up one day to a revelation that just completely shatters your reality. You find out your whole existence, like this identity you've forged, is a total lie.
And not just a harmless lie, either.
No, a lie built on the blood of your own ancestors. A lie that basically demands you have to turn against the exact person you swore to protect.
Which is just a staggering dilemma.
It really is. And that blood-soaked dilemma is right at the heart of Khanzar, which is the dystopian empire we are tearing apart today.
Yes.
We are unpacking the cinematic and, narrative architecture of the highly anticipated Indian action epic, Salaar.
Yeah.
Part 2, Shouryaanga Parvam. And if you are joining us for this deep dive, you probably already know we have a lot of ground to cover.
Oh, absolutely. It's a phenomenal scenario to ponder. And the goal for us today is really to peel back all those layers of high-octane action.
Because there's a lot of it.
Right. There's so much visceral violence and roaring crowds, but beneath all of that, there is this masterfully constructed narrative architecture. We really need to analyze the tragic psychological breakdown of this legendary brotherhood, Deva and Varda.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to uncover the incredibly dark, blood-soaked history of the Shouryaanga tribe, which is what sets this entire tragedy into motion.
Right, because the transition from part 1 to part 2 isn't just like a simple continuation of the plot. It is a fundamental shift in the whole psychological landscape.
It really is night and day.
Yeah, I mean, part 1, ceasefire, it felt like a pressure system building underground. You had all these factions, all the political machinations, but there was a lid on it.
It was very contained.
Exactly, contained violence. But part 2, Shouryaanga Parvam, is the seismic event. The ground cracks open, and the emotional and political fallout just levels everything in its path.
Fallout is really the operative word there, I think. To understand the sheer explosive force of that breakdown in the present day, we absolutely have to unearth the buried sins of the past.
Right.
The devastation happening between Deva and Varda didn't just originate in a vacuum. It was forged centuries ago. We really have to travel back to the year 1129 AD and look closely at the blood-soaked soil of the Shouryaanga tribe.
Okay, so 1129 AD, this is the foundational year of Khanzar. 3 major clans came together to build this empire, right? The Manars, the Shouryangas, and the Gilzars.
Correct.
But the focus here is intensely on the Shouryangas, and the sources don't just describe them as a founding pillar, but specifically as the protectors and the ultimate executioners of Khanzar.
Yes, that phrasing is crucial.
So let's dig into that specific phrasing. What does it actually mean to be an executioner clan in a dystopian monarchy?
Well, it basically means they were the state's monopoly on absolute violence. They weren't merely politicians sitting in council chambers, debating tax laws or trade routes or whatever. In a lawless, feudal society like Khanzar.
Which is essentially a heavily fortified city-state.
Exactly. A militarized city-state operating totally outside the jurisdiction of any global government. In a place like that, power isn't maintained through diplomacy alone.
Definitely not.
It's maintained through the terrifying, just ever-present threat of physical annihilation. So the Shouryangas were the sheer, unadulterated martial force keeping the empire intact.
So they are the enforcers.
I mean, far more than just enforcers, really. They possessed this unmatched martial prowess that was passed down through generations. They were the physical embodiment of Khanzar's wrath.
Wow.
Yeah, if a rival faction stepped out of line, or if there was a rebellion among the subjugated populations, or even if an external threat somehow breached the walls, the Shouryangas were the instrument deployed to handle it.
So they were the sword arm of the state.
Precisely. Their entire culture, their training, their whole ethos was built around dealing out death in the name of the throne.
Okay, wait, I need to pause you right here because this is where the history takes a massively dark turn that feels, honestly, totally counterintuitive to me.
Okay, lay it out.
So in the year 1985, Raja Manar, who's the ruler of Khanzar at the time, he orders the systematic eradication of the Shouryangas, like a complete genocide.
Right.
I'm just having trouble squaring this. If the Shouryangas were the ultimate protectors, the executioners, the literal sword arm of the state, as you said, how does the king just wipe them out?
That's a great question.
I mean, why would a ruler destroy his own greatest asset? To me, it feels like an empire destroying its own immune system to cure a cold.
That immune system analogy is really fascinating, but it kind of operates on the assumption that the king views the health of the empire and his own personal survival as the exact same thing.
Oh, and they're not.
No, they are absolutely not. The answer lies in the deeply corrosive nature of absolute power. The genocide of 1985 wasn't a battlefield tactic against some foreign enemy.
It was internal.
Right. It was a desperate, ruthless political purge born entirely out of terror.
Terror of his own army.
Precisely. Rajamanar's primary motivation was just an unquenchable thirst for total dominance.
Oh, boy.
In a political structure like Kansar, a king literally cannot sleep soundly if there is a faction within his borders that is physically stronger than his own royal guard.
Ah, I see.
The Shouryangas' unmatched martial prowess transformed them from protectors into the ultimate existential threat to Rajamanar's paranoia.
So basically, because they could take the throne at any time, he had to just assume that they would.
Exactly. He didn't see them as his immune system. He saw them as an apex predator sharing his cage.
Wow, that's a terrifying way to live.
It is. He viewed them as a dormant virus that could, at literally any moment, decide they no longer needed a monarch king. So to secure unquestioned authority, he felt he had to completely eradicate the only people capable of challenging him.
So it's a preemptive strike.
A preemptive strike fueled by pure, unadulterated paranoia. And, I mean, the logistics of pulling that off, coordinating a slaughter of the most elite fighters in the world, it requires a level of betrayal and systemic coordination that leaves a permanent, rotting scar on the soul of the city.
And you can actually see that rotting scar in the way the film itself is constructed. Like, the history of this genocide isn't just handed to the audience in some scrolling text or a boring voiceover.
No, not at all.
It is baked directly into the atmospheric and sonic storytelling, which I found amazing.
Oh, totally. We see a very distinct transition in the visual architecture in Part 2, when the cinematographer Bhuvan Goda shifts the visual language away from the industrial iron or borderlands of Kansar that we saw dominating Part 1.
Yeah, all those dusty mechanical landscapes.
Exactly. We are thrust deep into the ancient, brutalist stone architecture of the Shouryaanga tribe's original territory.
Brutalist stone architecture. You know, the moment you say that, you can almost feel the physical weight of it.
Yeah.
It's heavy, it's cold, it's unforgiving. It's not sleek or modern. It feels like the stones themselves were carved with ancient blood. And the framing changes too, doesn't it?
It definitely does. The frames become noticeably wider. It moves away from the claustrophobic, shadowy alleys into these massive, cavernous spaces that can capture large tribal factions.
Right.
It evokes the scale of an ancient Roman or gladiatorial epic, but it's anchored entirely within this modern dystopian framework.
So it's all about visual weight.
Okay.
And that visual weight is just perfectly matched by the audio landscape Ravi Bajwa put together.
His work here is incredible.
Yeah, he introduces a distinct tribal operatic vocal chant that is specifically dedicated to the Shouryaanga legacy.
The sound design here is so critical because it relies heavily on percussive weight rather than traditional melodies.
Lots of drums.
Yes. You have heavy industrial metals clanging, these deep, vibrating bass drops, and these relentless, rhythmic war drums.
It literally sounds like the heartbeat of a resurrected army. It's like a sonic haunting.
A sonic haunting is the perfect description. The music is actively reminding the audience and the characters that the past is not dead.
Right.
The 1985 genocide is a living, breathing entity within the walls of Kansar. The heavy, reverberating audio physically makes the audience feel the absolute terror of this executioner clan's legacy. It creates a real sense of impending doom.
But, you know, that impending doom isn't just an abstract political concept. And this is where the genius of the narrative structure really kicks in for me.
Yeah.
Because this ancient history of genocide, this buried trauma, is actually a ticking time bomb living right inside our protagonist. This massive historical weight leads directly to a devastating identity crisis for Diva.
Absolutely. To really grasp the magnitude of Diva's awakening in Part 2, we have to contrast it sharply with his existence in Part 1.
We have to look at where he started.
Right. We have to analyze the sort of loyal hound persona he inhabited before the truth of his bloodline was revealed.
Okay, so in the first installment, we find Deva living in self-imposed exile in Tinsukia. And let's just clarify what Tinsukia represents here. It's essentially the middle of nowhere, completely far removed from the political machinations of Kansar.
It's exile.
Yeah, it's a place where a man goes to disappear, to basically become a ghost. And his physical character design reflects that desire to vanish. He literally wraps his hands in chains, in heavy industrial tape, to suppress his own violent instincts.
He is a man who operates with absolute zero personal ambition. He functions purely as a weapon, like a sleeping giant.
Right.
And he only unleashes that suppressed violence when he hears the literal whistle of his childhood friend Varda.
Let me throw an analogy at you because I think it really helps visualize his mental state.
Go for it.
Diva's wrapped hands, those literal chains, act like a straitjacket. But the crucial detail is that it's a straitjacket he willingly put on himself to protect the world from his own nature, and specifically to protect his friend.
Yes.
He viewed himself as a violent anomaly, like a dangerous dog that needed a leash, and Varda was the only one allowed to hold that leash.
His entire existence was subjugated to the will and the safety of another person. He was a force of nature that had voluntarily caged itself in service of loyalty.
Which is wild.
It is. But then the paradigm shift hits. In part 2, the realization of his true ancestry shatters those chains, both literal and metaphorical, completely.
Right, because David discovers that he is not just some random, anomalously strong warrior. He is the rightful heir to the throne of Kansar.
The sovereign.
Exactly. He is the ultimate sovereign of the Shouryaanga tribe, the very clan that Raja Manar, the father of the friend he has dedicated his life to protecting, tried to erase from the face of the earth. I mean, the cosmic irony of that is just staggering.
It fundamentally rewrites his reality. The psychological burden of this transition is immense.
I can't even imagine.
Right. Deva is no longer fighting for a friend's validation or a simple childhood promise. That simplicity is just gone forever. He is now bearing the incomprehensible weight of a dead clan's legacy.
The ghosts of the 1985 genocide.
Exactly. He's carrying them on his shoulders. The blood of his slaughtered ancestors is demanding restitution.
And you see this internal shift completely transform Prabhas' physical performance on screen.
The acting shift is brilliant.
It really is.
Yeah.
If part 1 was defined by silence, looking down, and this massive physical restraint, part 2 is defined by absolute dominance and simmering rage. He goes from being a caged animal to the undisputed apex predator.
You notice it immediately in the body language. The posture straightens, the eye contact becomes lethal.
And the wardrobe changes.
Yeah, he steps into royal Shouryaanga attire. He starts wielding these heavy, archaic, tribal weapons, which, by the way, require a completely different, more aggressive fighting style than the contained brawling we saw earlier. And he does it with this effortless, terrifying charisma.
It's like they're totally different.
He isn't just a bodyguard fighting off thugs anymore. He is an executioner carrying out the will of his ancestors.
I mean, put yourself in Davis' shoes for a second.
Yeah.
You wake up tomorrow to find out that your family's hidden history, this horrific history of slaughter and betrayal, dictates that your biological destiny is to destroy the very political structure that your best friend is trying to control.
Your best friend who gave you your only sense of purpose.
Exactly. You are a man totally trapped by destiny.
He is forced into a sovereignty he never asked for, a crown forged from the ashes of his own people.
Yeah.
But what elevates this narrative from a simple, revenge story into a true classical tragedy is that Deva's realization is really only half of the catastrophic equation. Because the moment Deva assumes that mantle, the moment he accepts his Shouryaanga blood, it inherently triggers a devastating psychological collapse in Varda.
Which brings us to the psychology of a stolen crown. We really can't talk about Deva's ascension without talking about Varda's instant blinding paranoia.
Yeah, they are intrinsically linked.
And Vardaraja Manar, played by Prithviraj Sukumaran, is just such a complex figure. To understand his total breakdown, we have to look at the trauma of the sidelined prince.
Varda's formative years are defined by profound invalidation. He spent his entire youth being sidelined, humiliated, and systematically stripped of his birthright by his own step-siblings and his father, Raja Manar.
It was a brutal childhood.
Kansar is a viper's nest where wetness is just an open invitation to be murdered. He grew up in an environment of constant, suffocating threat.
He was essentially the runt of the royal litter. And the only reason he survived his childhood, the only reason he wasn't quietly assassinated by a rival lord or a jealous sibling, is because Deva stood behind him.
Yes.
Deva was his impenetrable shield.
And that dynamic is the absolute crux of Varda's psychological fragility. Varda's core identity is built entirely on vulnerability and deep-seated dependence.
Wow.
His very instinct for survival is inextricably linked to Deva's physical presence. Without Deva, Varda believes, on a cellular level, that he is dead. Therefore, his sense of security is completely externalized. It rests entirely in the hands of another man.
I want to use a structural metaphor here.
Go ahead.
Varda's entire psychological foundation His sense of safety, his ability to project power, is built on Deva being a load-bearing wall.
Oh, I like that.
Deva is the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing on him.
Yeah.
So at the end of part 1, when Varda finally achieves his ultimate goal and takes the throne with Deva's help, you would think he can finally breathe.
You would naturally assume sitting on the seat of absolute power would cure the insecurity.
Exactly. But it does the exact opposite. The moment he gets the crown, his insecurity spikes to a fever pitch. Because he knows, deep down, he didn't win that throne through his own political capital or his own martial strength. He won it because his load-bearing wall smashed the opposition.
It is a brilliant study in the psychology of illegitimate power. The imposter syndrome isn't just in his head. It is a demonstrable political reality.
Yeah.
And then the ultimate betrayal occurs. Varda discovers that his savior, his shield, his best friend, is actually a member of the Shouryaangas.
And not just a surviving member, but the rightful prophesied king of the entire empire. So going back to that metaphor, Varda realizes that his crucial load-bearing wall actually belongs to the structural blueprint of the building next door.
Exactly.
The collapse is instantaneous.
And this is where many viewers might struggle if they don't understand the mechanics of Kenzar. The obvious question people have is, if Deva never actually wanted the throne and has spent his whole life proving his loyalty, why doesn't Varda just trust him?
Oh, I know. I can hear people yelling at their audio players right now. Like, why can't they just sit down and have a drink and say, hey, man, I don't want your crown. You keep it. Let's just rule together. Why the instant paranoia?
Because that assumes they operate in a rational, democratic environment. Prithviraj Sukumaran's performance beautifully captures a man who is trapped by his environment.
Yeah, he's not just a cartoon bad guy.
Exactly. Varda isn't being a generic, irrational villain. He understands the political ecosystem of
The
Kenzar.
voting lords, all that stuff.
Right, the political machinery, the complex web of voting lords, the Kapu, the Doras, the tribal factions. It just does not allow for best friends sharing power.
Because absolute power cannot be shared, by definition.
Precisely. In a kingdom built on absolute ruthless power, a rightful king who claims he doesn't want the throne is a political impossibility.
That's an oxymoron.
It is a concept that the voting lords simply cannot compute and will never accept. Even if Varda completely believes that Deva means him no personal harm, the mere perception of Deva's blood right makes Varda's rule inherently illegitimate in the eyes of the court.
As long as Deva is breathing, every single lord in that room is looking at Varda and thinking, you're only sitting there because the real king lets you.
Exactly. His paranoia isn't necessarily that Deva will stab him in the back while he sleeps. It's that the world will forever view Deva as the true master and Varda as a mere placeholder.
A puppet.
A puppet. And for a man who spent his entire life being sidelined, humiliated, and told he was worthless, that perception is a psychological death sentence. He would rather burn the empire to the ground than be perceived as weak again.
Wow. That just makes so much sense. It's not even just about the interpersonal relationship between the two of them anymore.
No, it's bigger than them.
It's about the fact that they exist in a system that demands a clear, undisputed apex predator. Varda's deep-seated trauma and Deva's inescapable ancestral duty create this unavoidable collision course.
Yes.
And that collision course is being aggressively accelerated by the dark political machinery surrounding them. The environment is actively rooting for their brotherhood to fail.
The Brotherhood becomes collateral damage in a much larger game of geopolitical chess. And to understand how they are pushed over the precipice, we have to examine the architects of division within the narrative.
The manipulators.
Right, the supporting characters who manipulate the structural flaws in their relationship.
The characters who act like corrosive acid on the foundation of their friendship. Let's talk about Radha Rama Manar, played by Shriya Reddy, and Parva, played by Bobby Sima.
Shriya Reddy's character, Radha Rama Manar, is a masterclass in what we can call intellectual villainy.
Oh, I love that term.
She operates entirely differently from the brute force of the executioner clans.
So explain how that intellectual villainy actually works in practice. Like, what is she doing behind closed doors?
Well, she understands that you cannot defeat Deva in a physical confrontation.
Obviously not.
Right, and you cannot easily sever Varda's emotional attachment to him. So, she leverages the one thing that governs Kenzar above all else, the law.
Bureaucracy.
Specifically, the voting mechanisms of the ruling council. Kenzar is divided into territories managed by lords, and major decisions require a consensus or a majority vote.
That's right.
Radha Rama manipulates these voting lords. She plants seeds of doubt about Varda's legitimacy. She orchestrates political crises that force Varda into corners where the only legal face-saving move is to assert dominance over Deva.
She basically weaponizes the bureaucracy of the empire against their friendship.
Exactly.
She creates scenarios where Varda has to choose between looking like a strong king to his voting lords or being a loyal friend to Deva. And because of his trauma, he will always choose to look strong.
Precisely. She builds a political cage around them. And while she is managing the daylight politics, you have Bobby Simha's character, Harva, operating in the shadows.
Oh, man.
He acts as the silent catalyst that accelerates the division.
That guy has this incredibly menacing, quiet intensity.
He is deceptive and opportunistic. While Radha Rama manipulates the law and the lords, Bharva manipulates the ground-level chaos.
Setting fires.
Literally and figuratively. He ensures that rumors spread, that skirmishes happen at the worst possible times, and that the tension never has a chance to cool down. Together, they ensure that the political pressure on Varda and Deva becomes insurmountable.
It's like they are systematically locking every exit door in a burning building until the only path left for Deva and Varda is straight through each other.
That's exactly what it is.
When you look at this dynamic, it's impossible not to see the heavy parallels to classical epic tragedies.
Oh, the narrative structure draws heavily from epics like the Mahabharata, specifically the dynamic between Karna and Duryodhana, or even Julius Caesar and Brutus from Shakespeare.
How so? Walk us through that parallel.
Well, in those classical tragedies, the conflict rarely stems from simple mustache-twirling evil.
Right, it's never just good guy versus bad guy.
Exactly. The heartbreak comes from characters who are bound by honor, duty, or deep affection, but are forced into mortal combat by the inescapable mechanics of their society.
Which is exactly what's happening here.
The true tragedy in Salaar. Part 2 is that neither Deva nor Varda actually wants to kill the other. There is no initial malice.
Deva just wants to protect his friend, and Varda just wants to feel safe.
But the complex political structure of Khanzar, the intertwining family trees, the historical blood debts of the 1985 genocide, the demands of the voting lords, it acts as an unfeeling machine that demands blood to keep its gears turning.
It has to have violence.
It demands a resolution that can only be achieved through violence. They are trapped in a system that requires them to destroy the one thing they love to survive.
And you can literally see this emotional toll, this progression from intimacy to public spectacle, reflected visually on the screen.
The color grading is brilliant.
Let's dig into the visual toll of this crucible. In part 1, when their bond was intact, the world was painted in these monochrome charcoal grays.
The gray palette was highly intentional. It signified a suppression of truth. They were hiding from destiny, operating in the shadows, keeping their shared history a secret from the larger political machine.
It felt very intimate, despite the violence.
Exactly.
But then we get to part 2, and the visual philosophy explodes. We transition to these incredibly warm, harsh, blood-stained tones, the oranges, the deep reds.
It gets so vibrant.
And the scale of the environment shifts completely.
We move from localized street fights and contained skirmishes to massive gladiatorial-scale armies clashing in the open.
It's like Deva and Varda have moved from playing a private game of chess in a dark, quiet room where only they knew the rules, to suddenly being thrust into the center of a blindingly bright Roman Colosseum.
A Colosseum is the perfect image.
You know, the whole empire's watching them, screaming at them, demanding they draw blood. The privacy of their brotherhood is entirely gone, replaced by the public spectacle of warfare.
That visual evolution is a direct physical manifestation of their internal states being dragged out into the harsh light of reality.
Yeah.
The conflict can no longer be contained internally. It must be waged externally on a massive scale. And that seamlessly transitions us into how this emotional narrative is actually executed on screen. Because this dense psychological breakdown isn't just conveyed through dialogue or somber dramatic stares, it is violently, relentlessly expressed through the film's groundbreaking action choreography.
We have to talk about the cinematic execution, because Prashanth, the director,
Yeah.
is famous for balancing myth and chaos.
Yes, he is.
And the shift in the action choreography from part 1 to part 2 is just staggering.
In part 1, the action was brutal, yes, but it was contained. It was a man fighting off assassins or local gangs.
Smaller scale.
Right. In Shouryaanga Parvam, the action enters the realm of large-scale battlefield strategy. We are talking about the deployment of ancient tribal weapons, massive axes, halberds, spears, clashing directly against heavy dystopian firearms and vehicle-mounted combat.
It's this wild juxtaposition of ancient primal warfare meeting industrial-era tech.
It really is.
And Neil employs these mass elevations to make the violence feel mythological. For you listening who might not be familiar with the term, a mass elevation is a cinematic technique heavily used in Indian cinema where a character's presence, their entrance, or a specific action is built up using editing, music, and framing to make them seem larger than life, almost godlike.
And the primary tool he uses to achieve this in the action sequences is speed ramping.
Right, switching rapidly from extreme slow motion to hyperspeed frames within a single continuous shot.
When you combine that technique with the archaic weapons, it changes the fundamental texture of the violence.
How so?
Well, when Deva swings a massive tribal weapon, the speed ramping makes the audience feel the kinetic energy, the sheer gravitational weight of the metal-crushing armor and bone.
You feel every hit.
It is unapologetic, raw, and incredibly visceral.
It's exhausting to watch in the best way possible, but I think the crucial point here is that this raw violence is not merely there for spectacle.
Definitely not.
It serves a vital narrative purpose.
The violence is the physical manifestation of Deva and Varda's psychological breakdown. The lawless ethos of Kansar does not allow for diplomacy, mediation, or therapy.
Good luck finding a therapist in Kansar.
Exactly. Trauma, betrayal, and heartbreak are processed entirely through the edge of a blade and the barrel of a gun.
Yeah.
The sheer brutality, the exhaustive nature of the action sequences reflects the sheer brutality of their broken bond. Every blow Deva lands is an expression of his ancestral burden, and every army Varda throws at him is an expression of his paralyzing insecurity.
Okay, so we've established that the film is a technical and emotional juggernaut. It's dense, it's violent, it's steeped in history.
Very much so.
But let's take a step back and objectively evaluate the architecture of this film. Building a world this dense has its pros and cons. First, the strengths. The unprecedented scale sets a new benchmark for production value and world building in Indian action cinema.
Furthermore, it succeeds where many expansive sequels fail. Emotional anchoring.
That's huge.
It doesn't sacrifice its emotional core for bigger explosions. The heartbreak of shattered loyalty remains the focal point throughout all the chaos.
Right.
Additionally, it offers masterful, satisfying character resolutions, cleanly tying up the narrative threads regarding Ati's father and Rajamanar's past that were left dangling in the first film.
But there are vulnerabilities, and I think it's important to be honest about them. The sheer volume of characters can be a lot to handle.
It's very dense.
We are talking about multiple voting lords, counselors, complex sub-factions, overlapping family trees, and centuries of history. If you look away from the screen for 5 minutes, you might miss a crucial shift in a political alliance that dictates the next battle.
The cognitive load required to track the geopolitics of Kansar is undeniably high for a casual viewer.
And then there's the atmosphere. It is relentlessly, suffocatingly grim.
Yes.
There is zero comic relief.
None.
None. No witty sidekicks, no moments of levity. It is 3 hours of absolute tension and violence. But I want to push back on that a bit. Doesn't an audience need a breather? 3 hours of unrelenting grimness sounds exhausting. Does a director risk alienating the audience by refusing to give them a single moment to laugh and release that tension? Is the lack of comic relief a flaw in the filmmaking?
It's a valid critique from a traditional blockbuster pacing standpoint where the formula dictates a laugh every 10 minutes to keep the audience comfortable.
Right, the Marvel formula, essentially.
Exactly. However, in this specific context, I would argue it is an absolute artistic necessity.
Why?
Consider the immense thematic weight of what we are discussing. We are dealing with the legacy of a systematic genocide, the heavy, inescapable burden of ancestral trauma, and the heartbreaking, violent collapse of a legendary brotherhood.
True.
Injecting lightheartedness or comedic relief into a tragedy of this magnitude would severely undercut the gravitas of the narrative. It would feel cheap.
It would be tonal whiplash.
Exactly. It leaves no room for laughter because Kansar itself is a world entirely devoid of joy. It is a machine built on blood. The relentless heaviness is a feature, not a bug. It forces the audience to endure the exact same suffocating pressure, the same lack of escape as the characters themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. It respects the intelligence of the audience, by committing fully to its dark tone.
Yes, it doesn't compromise.
It doesn't give you a cheap laugh to relieve the tension. It forces you to sit in the intense discomfort of what absolute power does to the human soul.
And that ultimately is the triumph of the film's architecture.
Let's bring it all together. What a massive, heavy journey. We started by unearthing the dark, bloody foundation of the Shouryaanga tribe back in 1129 AD, and the horrific paranoid genocide of 1985 that turned them from executioners into a ghost clan.
And we watched as that buried history forced Deva, a man who just wanted to be a loyal shield, to awaken to his terrifying destiny as a rightful ancestral king.
Right. And we traced how that awakening inherently triggered the tragic regression of Varda. We saw a sidelined prince finally achieve his dream of the throne, only to be completely consumed by an inescapable paranoia fueled by his own trauma and the manipulative political machinery of Kansar.
It is a profound observation on the nature of conflict, the visual and auditory spectacle, the speed ramping, the massive armies. They merely serve as the grand canvas for a very intimate, agonizing story about the collapse of trust.
And I think what this deep dive really proves is that the best action films, the ones that really stick with you, the ones you think about for days after, are actually deeply human tragedies disguised as blockbusters.
I completely.
The true masterpiece of Salaar, Part 2, isn't the scale of the explosions. It is the heartbreaking cost of power. It shows us that in a world built entirely on blood and paranoia, loyalty is the most dangerous liability you can possibly carry.
A liability that eventually destroys everyone involved.
Which brings us to our final thought. Something for you, the listener, to mull over long after you finish this deep dive. Think about the trajectory of Deva. In Part 1, he physically chained his own hands to suppress his violent nature.
He wore his captivity on the outside?
For everyone to see. He was a prisoner of his own loyalty. But in Part 2, when he shatters those physical chains, accepts his Shouryaanga bloodline, and prepares to take the crown, you have to wonder.
Is he actually free?
Right. Is the throne of Kansar just a heavier, invisible chain? Does anyone, even an absolute, genetically prophesied sovereign like Deva, or a paranoid, manipulative ruler like Varda, actually rule this empire? Or does the bloody, inescapable history and the political machinery of Kansar simply rule them?
It challenges the very concept of free will within a system specifically designed for perpetual violent conflict. If your destiny is predetermined by the blood of a 1985 genocide, choice is just an illusion.
So, going back to where we started, if you realize your whole life as a protector was a lie built on your ancestors' blood, maybe the ultimate tragedy isn't that you have to fight your best friend. Maybe the ultimate tragedy is realizing that, crown or no crown, executioner or protector, you were never really free at all. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the stories you consume, look beneath the surface of the spectacle, and we will catch you next time.
Imagine spending 400 crore,
Right.
which is, roughly 50 million US dollars. But hold on, in the Indian film economy, where things like production costs and labor and scaling are just vastly different, that actually translates to the purchasing power of a $250 million Marvel Avengers movie.
Yeah, it's a completely different scale.
Exactly. It is a bet the studio number. Now, imagine putting that staggering amount of money on the table and realizing your biggest enemy isn't piracy.
Yep.
It isn't a rival studio, and it isn't even bad reviews. Your biggest enemy is that your movie is physically exhausting your audience.
Yeah, that is a wild realization.
Right. So today, we are looking at a 400 crore rescue mission, and I want to welcome you to this deep dive because we have a lot to unpack here.
It is, honestly, a phenomenal way to frame it. Because the sequel we're analyzing today, Salaar Part 2, Shouryaanga Parvam, is entirely built around solving that exact crisis.
Yep.
And, understanding how a mega blockbuster is built behind the scenes reveals a lot more about the final product than any trailer ever could.
So, just to set the mission for today's deep dive, we are going to completely step away from the fictional lore of Kansar today.
We're getting out of the fantasy.
Exactly. Instead, we have a stack of fascinating industry notes, and we are going to look strictly at the ground reality. We're talking about the real-world production architecture, the multi-year timeline shifts, and the, well, frankly, terrifying financial math of mounting this pan-Indian sequel.
Because we're really looking at the intersection where cold, hard, logistical reality crashes into creative vision.
Right.
And the very first hurdle they face isn't even creative at all. It's purely operational. I mean, before a single frame of this sequel can be shot, the production has to solve this unbelievable logistical puzzle.
A puzzle involving cast and crew that spans across multiple massive film industries within India.
Exactly.
And you might be listening to this thinking, why do I care about a production timeline? Just tell me about the movie.
Right, like, get to the action.
Yeah, but you really have to understand the scale here, because if you've been following the online chatter at all, you might have heard rumors that Salaar 2 was shelved entirely.
Oh, yeah, those rumors were everywhere.
Everywhere. So let's clear the air right now. That is false. The film is absolutely happening, but the operational timeline has undergone massive structural changes.
And the reason why is fascinating. To understand the delay, you really have to look at the calendars of the Pan-India cast and the director, Prashanth Neel.
Yeah.
Because in this ecosystem, these individuals are not just, people who sit around waiting for a studio to greenlight a project.
Right.
They are walking economies. I mean, they're entire industries unto themselves.
The best way I can describe this scheduling matrix is, well, it's like high-stakes air traffic control.
Ooh. Oh, that's a good analogy.
Imagine you're in the control tower at the busiest airport in the world, right? And you have these heavy-hitting jumbo jets just circling the runway. You've got megastars, you've got a superstar director.
And they're all burning fuel.
Right, they're burning fuel, waiting for clearance. And one delay could cause a massive pileup in the entire Indian film industry.
It's like air traffic control. But imagine if the planes could just decide they want to land at a different airport entirely.
Oh, yeah.
Because these stars have ultimate agency. So let's look at the actual pieces on the board here. The director, Prashanth Neel, is currently filming a massive project called Dragon.
Okay.
That one stars Junior NTR, and it's locked in for a June 11th, 2027 release.
2027. Got it.
Yeah, so he cannot physically or mentally be in two places at once right now.
And while he's flying that plane, the lead actor, Prabhas, is flying two others.
Exactly.
He is wrapping up a film called Fauji, which is targeted for December 2026. And on top of that, he is actively prepping for Spirit, which is this highly anticipated cop drama scheduled for March 5th, 2027.
Right.
So you have a director and a star tied up in three massive, completely unrelated blockbusters.
And this is where a lot of casual observers get it wrong. They look at this massive gap between the release of Part 1 and the production of Part 2, and they assume, oh, it's a sign of troubled production.
Right. They think the studio is disorganized.
Exactly. But looking at the timeline from these industry notes, this delay is actually a highly strategic alignment.
Okay, how so? Because, it just looks like a traffic jam to me.
Because it creates the perfect runway for undivided attention.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, by the time Prashanth Neel finishes the really grueling post-production and release of Dragon in mid-2027...
Prabhas will have completely cleared his slate.
Exactly. He'll be done with both Fauji and Spirit. They are intentionally aligning the aftermath of those three massive projects.
So it's deliberate.
Completely deliberate. When they finally come together for Salaar 2, there are no scheduling conflicts. There's no split focus, no compromising.
Wow.
It isn't a delay at all. It is a meticulously calculated staging phase.
But, a movie doesn't just sit in a drawer gathering dust while the director and star are off shooting other things.
Right, definitely not.
The downtime is actually being weaponized. The notes we have indicate that this massive gap allowed the writing team to execute a really rigorous polishing phase of the script.
Yeah, they fundamentally reworked it.
And the mechanism of how they reworked it is critical. The mandate was to trim unnecessary length, right? They wanted to ensure a much tighter, fast-paced screenplay than Part 1.
Which is a huge shift.
Yeah, and they did this specifically as a reaction to changing audience tastes and the direct feedback from the first film.
Right.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
If you are sitting there with a red pen, trimming the length and speeding up the pace to chase what you think the audience wants today,
Yeah.
don't you risk losing the very thing that made the franchise work in the first place?
That's the million-dollar question. Or, well, the 400-crore question.
Exactly. Because Prashanth Neel's signature is this brooding, methodical, slow burn buildup where the tension just simmers for an hour before it finally boils over.
It's his trademark.
So if you chop that up just to make a fast-paced action montage, don't you ruin the recipe?
That is the exact vulnerability they are trying to manage right now. It is the delicate balance of pacing in modern cinema.
Right.
You are absolutely right that Neel's style relies heavily on atmospheric dread. But the feedback loop in today's box office is ruthless.
He really is.
Audiences are incredibly vocal about structural bloat.
So how do you speed up a slow burn director without, ruining his style?
Oh, You don't cut the quiet moments, you cut the redundant connective tissue.
Ah, okay.
The script rework isn't about making the movie fast in the way like a sports car is fast. It's about efficiency.
Efficiency, right.
It's about ensuring that every single scene actively propels the plot forward, rather than just lingering on atmosphere for the sake of atmosphere.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so you preserve the long, quiet stare-downs, but you remove the 3 scenes of people walking down a hallway just to get to the scare-down.
Right, you cut the commute.
Exactly, cut the commute. You remove the friction that slows the narrative momentum, but you keep the weight of the scenes completely intact.
Which makes total sense, because you absolutely cannot afford narrative friction when the stakes are this unbelievable.
No, you really can't.
Getting the pacing right isn't just an artistic choice here. It is a financial requirement. That 400+ crore budget we mentioned at the top, that fundamentally dictates every creative decision moving forward.
Because when you have a budget north of 400 crore, you're no longer just making a movie.
Right.
You are managing a multinational corporate investment. And that requires a very specific, uncompromising budget versus target matrix.
So let's break down where that money actually goes,
Right.
because it gives us a real window into the scale of what we're going to see on screen.
Absolutely.
I mean, it includes extensive CGI, obviously, but also massive physical battlefield sets that have to be constructed from the dirt up.
Huge sets.
And the premium star salaries required to lock in a pan-Indian cast.
Yeah, which is not cheap.
Not at all. But recouping that money means you cannot just be a hit in your home state. You have to conquer a massive geographic footprint.
And our sources explicitly outline 3 primary markets that they absolutely must capture to survive.
Okay, what are they?
The Telugu states, which consists of Nizam and Andhra, the Hindi belt, and Karnataka.
So explain to me why these 3 specific geographic and demographic markets are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Like, why not just focus on one massive market and dominate it?
Because the math simply doesn't work without all 3 operating in tandem.
Ah.
The Telugu states are the foundation. That is Prabhas's core fortress. It provides the massive guaranteed opening weekend numbers.
The initial surge.
Right, you need that initial explosion of revenue to signal to the rest of the country that the film is an event.
Okay, that makes sense. And Karnataka.
Karnataka is crucial because it's Prashanth Neil's home turf. That ensures guaranteed loyalty and sustained theatrical runs there.
Okay, so that leaves the Hindi belt. Why is that one so critical?
The Hindi belt is the ultimate volume multiplier.
The volume multiplier.
Yeah, the Hindi-speaking demographic in India represents a vast ocean of theaters, single screens, and multiplexes.
It's just huge.
It is the demographic that can take a regional hit film and turn it into a historic, record-breaking juggernaut.
Wow.
If a 400 crore film makes money in the South but fails to resonate in the Hindi belt, the studio loses money.
Period.
Period. The budget necessitates absolute, unprecedented dominance across all 3 of these incredibly diverse cultural landscapes simultaneously.
But hitting those numbers in the Hindi belt is mathematically impossible if the theaters are empty by the second weekend.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the exact crisis they faced with Part 1. People were walking out, not because the movie was bad.
No, not at all.
But because they were physically exhausted. The biggest hurdle they face in conquering those markets is sensory fatigue.
And sensory fatigue is a very real biological phenomenon.
Yeah, explain that, because it sounds crazy that a movie can physically tire you out.
It happens when a film pushes the audiovisual threshold to the absolute limit and then just holds it there for 3 hours.
Just constant intensity.
Right. The brain simply stops processing the spectacle and actually starts defending itself against the noise.
So interesting, because Part 1 was heavily criticized by a very vocal section of general viewers for 2 specific things.
Right.
First, the persistent, dark, charcoal gray visuals, and second, the relentlessly loud background score.
It was intense.
It's like, well, think of it like being served an incredibly rich, dense chocolate cake.
Okay, I like this.
You take that first bite, and it is mind-blowing. The flavor is so intense. But if you are forced to sit there and eat the entire cake in one sitting...
By the end of it, your palate is completely ruined.
Exactly. You aren't enjoying it anymore. You just want a glass of water.
That is a perfect analogy. Because the charcoal gray aesthetic and that booming sound design, they were highly effective for establishing the dystopian tone in the first hour.
Sure.
But eventually, the lack of visual and auditory contrast leaves the viewer feeling drained.
Yeah.
I mean, The human body releases cortisol when exposed to constant booming low-end frequencies. It literally stresses the audience out.
It induces a stress response. So if the Hindi belt requires sustained ticket sales and Part 1 fatigued the general audience,
Yeah.
then addressing this audiovisual assault isn't just an artistic choice, it's a fiscal rescue mission.
That's the exact diagnostic reality. The director faces the massive challenge of maintaining his unique, gritty directorial style without causing that audience exhaustion all over again in Part 2.
Right.
But there is a very strategic countermeasure in play regarding the audio, which is fascinating.
Yes, the audio asset strategy. Our notes reveal something incredible about the composer Ravi Basrur.
Yeah, this is brilliant.
Apparently, he holds this enormous archive of unused industrial tracking themes from the original recording sessions for the first film.
And when we talk about an unused audio archive in the context of sensory fatigue, it opens up a fascinating avenue for how you mix a movie.
How so?
Well, if the criticism of Part 1 was that the score was relentlessly loud, having an archive of these industrial tracking themes offers a way to build out the sequel's scale without just pushing the faders up.
Explain the mechanism of that. I mean, how does an industrial tracking theme solve the problem of a movie being too loud?
It comes down to texture versus volume.
Texture versus volume, okay.
Right. An industrial tracking theme implies rhythm. It implies the sound of machinery, of metal scraping, of grinding gears, of pistons firing.
Right, tactile sounds.
Exactly. When you rely on traditional orchestral scores, booming horns and crashing cymbals to convey scale, you eat up the mid to high frequencies where human dialogue sits.
Oh, I see. It becomes a wall of noise.
Yes, a literal wall of noise.
So you have to turn everything up just to hear the actor speaking.
Exactly. Everything gets louder fighting for space. But by utilizing industrial tracking themes, Basrur can drop the mid-range frequencies and utilize low-end rhythmic bass.
Wow.
You feel the machine rather than hear it screeching.
That is so smart.
Right. It allows the filmmakers to maintain the heavy, oppressive identity of Khanzar while actively avoiding the trap of sonic exhaustion.
They use the rhythm of the industry to build tension.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is far more sustainable over a 3-hour runtime than pure brassy volume.
Okay, so they have a plan to fix the audio mix. But fixing the volume and adjusting the EQ is only half the battle.
Right.
The core narrative foundation of this sequel poses a deeply unique challenge of its own, and this is where things get slightly precarious.
Yeah, it all comes back to the ghosts of the director's past.
Ghosts of the past.
Because the industry leaks surrounding this project suggest that the fundamental storyline of Salaar too traces directly back to Prashanth Neil's very first debut film, Yugram.
Wait, I have to stop you there.
Yeah, it's wild.
They are risking a 400 crore pan-Indian investment on the bones of a decade-old regional debut film.
I know.
That sounds like a massive vulnerability. I mean, how do they justify that to the financiers?
Look, it sounds incredibly risky on paper. But Yugram isn't just an old script. Structurally, it is almost Shakespearean.
Shakespearean in what way?
It's a mythic skeleton. It's all about loyalty, deep betrayal, and a hidden past. And that kind of narrative skeleton handles modern dressing exceptionally well.
Okay, I can see that.
But you are right to be skeptical, and so are the producers. Which is exactly why there is a very strict modernization mandate happening behind the scenes.
Ah, a modernization mandate. Because if you just reshoot the narrative beats of an older film shot for shot, today's audience is going to spot the predictable tropes immediately.
Instantly.
The mandate states that to prevent the narrative from feeling repetitive, it needs to be heavily modernized with high-tech action blocks.
But this is an incredibly difficult synthesis to achieve.
Yeah, how do you do that?
How do you graft brand new, high-tech action blocks onto a baseline story that was conceived years ago without it feeling like a completely forced artificial upgrade?
It feels like trying to bolt a jet engine onto a horse-drawn carriage.
That is exactly what it feels like.
Audience is going to see the bolts.
They will.
Yeah.
And the way you solve it is by ensuring the technology serves the emotion rather than just acting as window dressing.
Right.
It's the difference between a structural upgrade and a cosmetic one. You don't just hand the hero a massive Gatling gun because it looks cool in the trailer.
Right, it has to mean something.
Yes. You use the high-tech elements to escalate the stakes of the original emotional conflict. The world has evolved, and therefore the violence and the consequences have evolved alongside it.
So the modernization has to feel earned by the characters.
Completely earned.
And the way they are fundamentally solving both the sensory fatigue and the modernization challenge happens in one massive structural swing.
Oh, this is the best part.
They are doing a visual and tactical reset.
Yes. This is perhaps the most fascinating structural highlight of the entire project. The artistic core of Part 2 relies heavily on an extended historical flashback.
The narrative takes us all the way back to 1985.
1985.
And the notes specifically outline that this flashback documents the exact tactical betrayals that led to the fall of the Shouryaanga tribe.
Right.
But here is the crucial detail for the audience. Visually, this entire segment moves completely away from the modern charcoal gray machinery of Khanzar that we saw in Part 1.
It's a total shift.
Instead, it leans entirely into raw, primitive combat. We are talking heavy blades, axes, and tribal shield formations.
And this is where we see contrast as the ultimate cure for audience fatigue.
Contrast.
Yeah, think about the physical mechanics of the action. The audience complained about the relentless dark machinery and the endless spray of high-tech bullets.
Right, it was overwhelming.
So the director physically transports the narrative out of that environment.
It's like, imagine you've been playing this chaotic, futuristic sci-fi video game for 3 straight hours.
Okay.
You are surrounded by neon and lasers, your ears are ringing, and you are just numb to the spectacle.
Totally numb.
And then suddenly, the game drops you into the raw, dusty, tactical grit of ancient Sparta.
Oh, wow.
You are dealing with mud, wood, and the visceral heavy weight of an axe.
It jolts you awake.
It really does.
A shield formation feels inherently heavier and more dangerous than a laser gun because of the physics of the action.
Yeah, the tactile nature of it.
Exactly. You are no longer watching massive guns mow down hundreds of nameless extras from a safe distance. You are watching intimate, heavy, tactical betrayals play out in close quarters.
Where every swing requires real physical exertion.
Right. It completely resets your engagement with the world because the rules of engagement have fundamentally changed.
You trade the high-tech, noisy, exhausting machinery for grounded, hand-to-hand combat.
And it solves the visual fatigue, too.
Yes. By offering a different color palette, earthy tones, dust, blood, and sunlight, rather than just charcoal and steel.
A literal palette cleanser.
And it solves the narrative fatigue by providing deep foundational context to the grudges that drive the modern-day conflict.
But, it cannot stay in the past forever.
No, eventually we have to come back.
Right. Once that 1985 flashback explains all those deep-rooted historical betrayals, the narrative snaps back to the present day.
And in the present day, the ceasefire that ended Part 1 is completely broken.
Yes.
And this is where the scale of the screenplay really opens up into a geopolitical nightmare.
It gets so complex here.
The storyline systematically handles a multi-front civil war, and it does so through the complete political restructuring of Khanzar.
We really need to treat Khanzar like a real historical city-state here.
Yeah, because the script outlines 3 very distinct sequential phases of this collapse.
And phase 1 is the collapse of the voting assembly blocks as the Lords scramble for survival.
This is fascinating to me because the war doesn't start with mindless explosions.
No.
It starts in the boardroom. It begins with a political, white-collar collapse. Explain the mechanics of this. What are the voting assemblies in this world?
The voting assemblies represent the fragile legal structure of the city-state. It is the illusion of democracy among warlords.
The illusion of democracy.
Right. Think of it like a corporate hostile takeover or, actually, better yet, a run on a bank.
A bank run.
Yes.
Yeah.
Think about it. A banking system only works if everyone agrees the money is safe.
Right. It's all built on trust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The moment one person panics and withdraws their funds, everyone panics, and the bank collapses.
Wow.
The voting assemblies in Khanzar operate the exact same way. The moment one lord realizes the assembly votes are worthless and the laws no longer protect them, they withdraw their political support.
And then panic sets in.
Panic sets in. It is a systematic breakdown of order from the top down.
Which leads right into phase 2, the weaponization of the city-state's inner gates by Vardaraja Manor. So we go from a political bank run to a deeply militarized fortification.
Because once the politics fail, the military takes over.
Right.
The inner gates of Khanzar aren't just decorative architecture, they are strategic choke points.
Essential for defense.
Right. In siege warfare, controlling the gates means controlling the flow of resources, troops, and information.
So Vardarajaman are weaponizing them indicates a transition.
A massive transition. From a war of words in the assembly to a physical territorial lockdown. The elite lords have locked themselves in, preparing for a top-tier military conflict among themselves.
But then comes phase 3, and this completely upends the board.
This is the game changer.
The absolute mass mobilization of the lower-tier labor clans who are rallying under Deva's true royal lineage.
Yeah.
So we have gone from a white-collar political panic to a militarized fortification by the elites, all the way down to a full-blown grassroots revolution from the bottom.
If we look at the thematic weight of this progression, it is incredibly potent.
It really is.
You have the lower-tier labor clans rising up against the fortified lords. The script is using the classic cinematic trope of a true royal lineage, not just to put a crown on a king's head.
But to ignite a fundamentally class-based civil war within this fictional world.
Exactly. The elites are fighting over gates and assembly votes, but the true power lies in the sheer mass of the labor clans.
Right, because a fortified gate is completely useless if the people who operate the machinery, supply the food, and mine the resources decide to turn against you.
Exactly. Diva's lineage becomes the spark that weaponizes the working class against the ruling class. It grounds a highly fantastical 400-core world in a very relatable socioeconomic struggle.
That makes it so much more real.
It does. The sheer mass of the labor clans overwhelms those fortified elite choke points.
It is a massive escalation. I mean, we are talking about geopolitics, class warfare, siege tactics, and political bank runs.
It's huge.
But here's the thing that really stops me in my tracks.
Okay, what's that?
You can have the 400-crore budget. You can design a brilliant 3-phase multi-front civil war. You can execute a visceral 1985 flashback with axes and shields. You can do all of that.
Right.
But according to the production notes, the entire survival of this franchise depends on one single thing. And it isn't the CGI.
No, it isn't. It is the linchpin.
The linchpin.
And that linchpin is the nuanced acting dynamic of a single person.
It all comes down to Prabhas's performance dynamics.
Yes.
Specifically, the source material points to the razor-sharp transition between his on-screen restraint and his absolute unhinged executioner persona.
The contrast.
I just find it so wild that in a breakdown literally filled with corporate budgets, pan-Indian market strategies, and massive set pieces, the ultimate make-or-break factor is just a guy's face.
It's so true.
It is the micro-expressions of one actor.
But without that emotional anchor, the 400 core is just noise.
Just noise.
The reason this specific contrast works so well is the pressure cooker effect.
The pressure cooker.
Yet the unhinged executioner persona only has a visceral impact on the audience because of the profound restraint that precedes it.
Ah, I see.
If a character is always yelling, always violent, it becomes boring. It becomes white noise.
It loses its impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The tension lies in watching him hold it back. You are watching a volcano just waiting for the eruption.
Let's connect that back to what we discussed in segment 1. We know the writing team went in and trimmed the connective tissue of the script to make it a much faster-paced screenplay.
Right. They sped it up.
So if you speed up the plot, doesn't maintaining that slow burn acting dynamic become an incredibly precarious editorial challenge?
It becomes the central artistic challenge of the film.
Wow.
If the plot is moving faster around him, the director has to figure out how to maintain the stillness of the central character. The contrast actually becomes even more stark.
So you have this fast-moving, chaotic civil war swirling around a character who is exercising terrifying restraint.
Yes, it requires razor-sharp editorial focus. They have to ensure that the faster pace of the film doesn't accidentally edit out the quiet moments of tension that make Prabhas's transition so explosive.
Because if you cut the restraint to save time...
The explosion feels unearned.
Unearned.
The stillness is the structural anchor of the entire film.
It is a phenomenal balancing act.
Truly.
So, let's take a breath and look back at the massive journey we've just taken you on. We started by looking at the real-world logistical puzzle. The air traffic control of aligning Prashanth Neil's and Prabhas's massive outside projects, just to get them on the same runway.
Yeah, dealing with Dragon and Spirit and Fauci.
Exactly. Then we looked at the terrifying 400-plus crore financial pressures that demand absolute dominance across the Telugu states, Karnataka, and specifically the massive volume multiplier of the Hindi belt.
And we explored the very real biological danger of sensory fatigue.
The cortisol response.
Right, and the strategic brilliance of using Ravi Baswar's archive of industrial tracking themes to build auditory texture instead of relying on pure volume.
Dropping the mid-range for the low-end rhythm.
Exactly. We analyzed the modernization mandate of grafting high-tech stakes onto the Shakespearean skeleton of Ugram.
Brilliant.
And how the 1985 primitive combat flashback acts as a crucial contrast to cleanse the audience's palate.
Getting away from the charcoal gray lasers and back to the mud and axes.
Yeah.
And then we watched the geopolitical structure of Khanzar collapse. We watched the political bank run of the assemblies, the militarized siege of the inner gates, and the massive socioeconomic revolution of the labor clans.
A total societal breakdown.
And all of it, every single frame, theme, and dollar rests entirely on the micro expressions and the razor-sharp transition between restraint and rage in Prabhas's performance.
Which honestly brings us to a final underlying tension that I think is worth chewing on long after this deep dive ends.
Let's hear it.
When a film's production is this heavily influenced by actively correcting audience fatigue, when the creators are intentionally trimming the script, fundamentally altering the audio mixing, and modifying legacy storylines specifically to appease the feedback from part one.
That's a lot of changes.
It is. So at what point does a director's uncompromising vision become a crowd-sourced product?
Oh, wow. That is a deeply unsettling thought.
Right. Can a 400 crore blockbuster ever truly be auteur cinema, driven by a single uncompromising artistic voice?
I don't know.
Or in the modern era of mega budgets, is absolute adaptability and real-time market correction the true mark of a cinematic giant?
That completely changes how you watch a blockbuster.
It really does.
The next time you sit in a theater and the lights go down, remember, you aren't just watching a magical illusion or a fictional story.
No.
You are watching a massive real-time experiment in risk management, audience psychology, and creative adaptation. You are looking through the muddy waters of the diagnostic landscape and seeing the massive hidden engineering that holds it all together.
It's all engineering at that scale.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the magic and keep looking for the real-world architecture hiding right behind your favorite fictions.
I want you to imagine just for a second that you've spent, your entire life inside this sprawling, just terrifyingly massive diesel punk empire.
Oh, man. Just total dystopia.
Right. Exactly. Like, picture towering industrial sectors that literally blot out the sky, fortress walls so thick they have their own zip codes,
Yeah.
And it's this utterly impenetrable society governed by this hyper-complex web of voting blocks, heavily armed borders, cutthroat political laws.
A total nightmare of bureaucracy and machinery, basically.
Completely.
Yeah.
And every morning you wake up to the sound of assembly lines churning out modern artillery. It feels permanent, right? It feels like the absolute pinnacle of dystopian engineered progress.
Right, like nothing could ever bring it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then, one day, you look down at the ground beneath your feet and you realize something horrifying. The entire foundation of this monumental city-state, it isn't actually made of concrete or steel.
Right.
It is built entirely on an ancient, unpaid blood debt. And the people who are owed that blood, they haven't forgotten a single drop of it. Yeah. They've just been waiting in the dark.
I mean, it completely shatters the illusion of safety, doesn't it?
Totally.
Because once you realize that the foundation is rotten, you start to understand that, well, all the walls and the weapons in the world, they're entirely useless.
That won't save you.
Exactly. The danger isn't going to come from some, foreign army trying to breach the gates. The danger is already inside. It's bred into the very soil of the city.
It's already there.
Right. And that shift from external security to internal inevitable doom, that's exactly what we are pulling apart today.
Yeah, so today we are taking a deep dive into the absolute behemoth that is the Indian action epic Salaar. Part 2, Shouryaanga Parvam.
And just to be clear right up front, we are skipping the superficial plot recaps today.
Oh, absolutely. We're going way past that. Our source materials, specifically this incredibly detailed masterclass analysis called The Architecture of Absolute Wrath, give us a genuinely fascinating architectural blueprint of how this film operates on like a mechanical level.
Yeah, it's a structural breakdown.
Exactly. We are looking at the anatomy of wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have a massive blockbuster franchise, I mean, the default Hollywood instinct is to scale up by just going wider,
Oh,
right?
totally. You give the audience more explosions, introduce a giant blue laser that shoots into the sky.
Right. Add 3 new cities, throw in some shallow CGI, all of that.
Yeah.
But this film takes a drastically different approach. It scales up by scaling inward.
Yes. Inward.
It intensifies the claustrophobia of its own lore. It takes these ancient, incredibly primitive, mythic archetypes and drops them square into the middle of a modern dystopian nightmare.
Which is such a brilliant collision of ideas.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the phrase, the claustrophobia of its lore, is just such an evocative concept to me.
It's very specific, yeah.
Right. Usually epics are expansive. They want to give you sweeping landscapes.
Right.
But here, it feels like the more you learn about the history of Khanzar, the more suffocated you feel.
Well, you feel suffocated because the history of Khanzar is essentially an ideological trap. I mean, we really have to look at the fundamental duality driving the entire narrative engine of this film.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So on the surface, Khanzar is a hyper-modern industrial superpower. You've got the mechanics of a 20th century war machine, right? Submachine guns, heavy artillery, strict border checkpoints.
Endless assembly lines.
Exactly. It looks like a society that absolutely worships mechanical efficiency. But, and this is the catch, if you peel back that steel exterior, the actual machinery of human governance, the way these people interact and determine who holds power.
About the politics of it all?
Yeah, their politics have completely bypassed the Enlightenment, they've bypassed modern democracy entirely, and they operate purely on old world, Bronze Age monarchical rights.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a modern industrial state powered by the most primitive tribal mythology you can imagine.
So it's essentially like the aesthetics of a Mad Max dystopian future, but carrying the soul of an Old Testament kingdom.
That's a perfect way to put it, actually.
You have guys holding modern assault rifles, but they are enforcing laws that were written in blood like 1,000 years ago.
And that stark contrast, that clash, is the deliberate setup for the massive narrative pivot between part 1 and part 2.
Right, because part 1 sets up a very different expectation.
Exactly. If we look back at the structure of the first film, it offered a very comfortable, familiar moral framework for the audience. I mean, we followed Varda, right?
Now the outcasts.
This outcast fighting to reclaim his rightful place on the throne of Khanzar. We know how to consume that story. It's the classic sovereign versus the usurper.
The ultimate underdog story.
Right. We root for the underdog fighting against a rigged system. It feeds into our modern sensibilities of justice and fairness. We want the person who is cast out to break the wheel, to take their seat at the table.
Right, it operates on a moral compass that makes us feel good. Like, let's think of it this way. It's like watching your friend play a really grueling, multi-hour game of Monopoly.
Oh, I like this analogy.
They strategize, they get knocked down to their last dollar, they fight back from bankruptcy, and finally, after hours, they secure a boardwalk, they build the hotels, and they win the game.
And you're clapping for them, right?
Yeah, you watch them earn it against all odds. But then, right as they're counting their brightly colored Monopoly cash, another guy, Diva, our protagonist, walks into the room, doesn't say a word, and just violently flips the entire board into the air.
Just ruins the whole game.
Exactly. And at first, you're outraged. You think, what is this guy doing? My friend won fair and square. But then you realize the horrible truth.
The twist.
Right. Your friend didn't just win the game. His ancestors actually slaughtered Diva's ancestors to steal the physical Monopoly board in the first place.
Yeah, and that realization changes the entire nature of the game.
It totally flips it.
Suddenly, the rules of Monopoly don't matter at all because the board itself is a crime scene.
A crime scene.
And that is the original sin of Khanzar that part 2 reveals. The very throne Varda fought so hard to reclaim in the first film, it was stolen through the historical genocide of an entire tribe, the Shouryangas.
So the system he beat was already fundamentally illegitimate.
Exactly. You can't play by the rules of the city when the city itself is stolen property. And this strips away all the modern morality we usually cling to in cinema. I mean, there is no negotiation here. There's no democratic reform.
No peace treaties.
No, there's no, let's sit down and figure this out. We are operating purely on the principle of the right of blood over might.
Okay, I want to push back on that idea for a second. Because the right of blood historically is, Well, it's essentially just brutal nepotism, right?
Sure, yeah.
It's kings declaring they have some divine right to rule, which we, as a modern audience, usually reject as completely tyrannical. So why does the filmmaker strip away modern morality and force us to engage with such an archaic, brutal concept? Like, why does it actually feel so satisfying to watch?
Well, I think it feels satisfying because it completely removes the messy gray areas of modern diplomacy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, modern morality and storytelling often involves a lot of compromise. We see characters navigating bureaucracy, dealing with corruption, making these lesser evil choices.
Yeah, lots of red tape.
Exactly. But when you invoke the right of blood in a mythic context like this, you elevate the conflict from just mere politics to, like, cosmic order.
Cosmic order.
Yeah. Deva's motivation isn't driven by personal greed. He isn't flipping the board because he wants to, collect taxes from Khanzar or manage its trade routes.
He doesn't care about the hotels on Boardwalk.
Right. He doesn't desire political power at all. His motivation is cosmic restitution. His bloodline demands that the historical balance be restored.
So it's bigger than him.
Much bigger. And because there is zero selfish ambition driving his violence, his actions lose that taint of human corruption. His violence feels clean, it feels absolute and inevitable. He's functioning less as a politician and more as an immune system trying to eradicate a virus from the body of the earth.
An immune system eradicating a virus.
Yeah.
That's a truly fascinating way to frame it. But if he is completely devoid of personal greed, right? If he's just executing this ancient blood debt like a mathematical equation or some biological imperative,
Right.
you have to ask, does that actually make him a hero? Or is he something closer to a force of nature, like an earthquake or a hurricane, that simply lacks human empathy? Because, you can stand in awe of a hurricane, you can respect its power, but you don't necessarily root for it to destroy the coastline,
And that tension is exactly what the film is asking you, the audience, to sit with.
Wow.
Because traditional heroism is defined by choice and sacrifice, right? A hero sees a burning building, they overcome their fear, and they choose to run inside.
Right. They have agency.
Exactly. But a force of nature doesn't choose. It simply acts according to its state of being. And Deva is drifting dangerously close to that natural disaster territory.
He's the hurricane.
Yeah. The film forces us to question our own bloodlust as an audience. We want him to tear the system down because the system is deeply corrupt, but we also have to confront the sheer, terrifying monstrosity of what that destruction actually looks like.
It's ugly.
It really is. It is a total deconstruction of the cinematic savior trope.
And if your protagonist is essentially a dormant volcano, you have a massive narrative problem on your hands.
Oh, structurally, yes. It's a huge challenge.
Because you can't just have him erupting in every single scene for 3 hours, or the audience gets completely numb to it, right? The impact is totally lost. So you have to build a terrifying amount of anticipation.
And they do.
They really do.
Well,
And the way the film achieves this is by leaning heavily into a very specific ancient storytelling device, which our source points out: the archetype of the hidden exile.
yes, the hidden exile. It's one of the most potent narrative tools in human history.
Oh, absolutely.
We see it in ancient mythology, we see it in Shakespeare, and we see it deployed just brilliantly here. You take the supreme king, the ultimate, uncontested power in this entire universe, and you completely strip him of his identity.
You make him a nobody.
You force him to live as a nameless, common laborer. He is hidden in plain sight, living in this state of grinding, self-imposed exile. And not just for a few months to lie low, but for decades.
Decades. We aren't talking about a guy who went off the grid for a long weekend retreat to clear his head and practice mindfulness,
Yeah, no.
This is an entire lifetime of active suppression. I want you, the listener, to think about how that connects to everyday life. Think about a time at work or maybe in a relationship where you knew you were right. You knew you were capable of fixing a massive problem.
We've all been there.
Right. But because of office politics or your position in the hierarchy, you had to bite your tongue. You had to keep your head down, absorb the indignity, and just play a lesser role.
It eats away at you. It creates an actual physical tightness in your chest. The frustration is palpable. Now, take that everyday frustration, magnify it by 30 years, and add the weight of a slaughtered bloodline and a stolen kingdom.
I mean, the psychological pressure of that delayed gratification is just unbearable.
Unbearable.
And it works so well because modern cinema has conditioned us to expect immediate payoffs. A character gets wronged in scene 1, they gear up in scene 2, and they take their revenge in scene 3.
Instant gratification.
Right. But by denying the audience that release, by forcing us to watch this absolute apex predator absorb insult after insult while performing menial labor, the narrative builds this reservoir of tension that borders on agonizing.
It's physical tension.
It really is. You are watching water pile up behind a massive concrete dam, and you can literally see the hairline fractures starting to form.
And you are practically begging for the dam to break.
Yes.
But when it finally does break, when David drops the guise of the laborer and actually embraces his identity as the Shouryaanga heir, it isn't handled the way we expect at all.
Not even close.
He doesn't, like, rip open his shirt to reveal an S on his chest while his soaring brass section plays a triumphant melody.
No, not at all. And this is where the film's commitment to its tone is so absolute. When the reveal happens, it doesn't behave like a heroic awakening, it behaves like a horror sequence.
A horror sequence.
The text we are working with explicitly compares this moment to the awakening of an ancient, dormant, natural disaster. The people around him aren't cheering. They are terrified.
Even his friends.
Even his allies. They're forced to step back because they realize they haven't unleashed a savior. They have unleashed a predator.
Wow.
The film is brave enough to present its lead protagonist as a borderline monstrous figure. I mean, he is a savior to the wronged, yes, but he is a literal monster to the establishment. He completely blurs the line between a righteous redeemer and a ruthless, indiscriminate destroyer.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because this raises a massive logistical question within the world of the film. If Deva operates as this mythic, monstrous force of nature, what actually happens when that force collides with a highly structured, heavily bureaucratic society?
Yeah.
Because Khanzar isn't just, a group of bad guys hanging out in an abandoned warehouse. It is a meticulously organized dark state.
And this is perhaps the most structurally fascinating aspect of the world building.
Right.
Khanzar is a fully functioning, self-sustaining ecosystem of power. It has a real economy, internal intelligence, massive security forces, and a huge lower class. The architecture of this dark state is basically held up by 3 distinct operational factions, or pillars.
3 pillars.
Yeah, and watching these pillars buckle under the weight of Deva's return is just a masterclass in writing societal collapse.
Okay, let's pull those pillars apart, because I think understanding how they function is totally crucial to understanding why they eventually fail.
Absolutely.
So the first pillar is the outer industrial ring. This is essentially the muscle, the labor force.
Right. The outer ring is where the grim reality of Khanzar's industrial might is maintained day in and day out. This is where the manual laborers and the surviving disenfranchised lower-tier clans actually live.
The people doing the dirty work.
Exactly. They do the grueling, dangerous physical work required to keep the assembly lines moving and the city fed. But their perspective on the power dynamic is entirely unique. They don't look at the ruling class with any kind of respect.
They probably hate them.
They look at them with deeply suppressed hatred. So when Deva, the exiled heir of the betrayed Shouryaanga tribe, finally returns, they don't just see a political rival to the current king. They see a literal messiah.
Man, that is a terrifying prospect for a ruling class. The very foundation of your society, the people holding the physical infrastructure together, are already religiously devoted to the force that wants to tear your city down to the bedrock.
It's the ultimate internal threat.
You're basically sitting on a massive powder keg, and the laborers are the ones holding the match. So, knowing that the bottom is completely unstable, we move up to the second pillar, the voting assembly. This is the bureaucracy of Khanzar.
Yes. The voting assembly represents this really fascinating attempt to put a civilized, legalistic mask over raw barbarism.
Putting a suit on a warlord.
That's exactly it. These are the paranoid lords and clan leaders who rule through a highly sophisticated modern system. We're talking treaties, ceasefires, temporary alliances, and these incredibly complex voting blocks.
They're the politicians of the dark state.
Right. But their entire survival depends on one critical, fragile assumption, that everyone at the table actually agrees to play by the rules of their legal framework.
Which works until it doesn't.
Right, like if someone violates a ceasefire, there are supposed to be bureaucratic consequences. If a vote doesn't go your way, you're supposed to maneuver politically. It is a system built entirely on negotiated boundaries.
But Deva doesn't even acknowledge that the boundaries exist.
He doesn't care.
Not at all. The dynamic between the voting assembly and Deva is it's like watching a highly advanced multi-million-dollar computer firewall trying to negotiate with a literal sledgehammer.
Oh, that's a great image.
Right. The firewall is doing everything it was programmed to do. It's throwing up error codes. It's analyzing incoming data packets. It's demanding encrypted passwords. It's threatening legal action. It is a brilliant, highly sophisticated system.
But the sledgehammer.
The sledgehammer doesn't speak code. It doesn't care about your passwords or your treaties. It just violently smashes the physical server into pieces.
And there goes the firewall.
Exactly. The entire political apparatus of the voting assembly is rendered completely useless in an instant because they're trying to legislate a natural disaster. You just can't pass a law to make an earthquake stop.
You really can't. And when diplomacy and bureaucracy fail so spectacularly, it immediately triggers the collapse of the final pillar.
Correct.
Yes. The assembly panics, the firewall is shattered, and the responsibility falls entirely on the third pillar. The core monarchy. The crown. The deeply paranoid inner circle of the ruling Minar family.
What do they do?
Well, they look at the outer wing rising up, they look at the voting assembly in shambles, and they realize that their words and their laws mean absolutely nothing anymore.
So they panic.
They panic, and they turn to the only language a sledgehammer understands. Raw, unadulterated military force.
But the tragic irony here, the tragic irony of the core monarchy, is that Khanzar's military was designed to keep the rest of the world out.
Yes, it's a defensive setup.
They have these massive walls and heavy artillery meant to repel foreign invaders. But the threat isn't outside. The threat is sitting in the living room.
It's already inside the house.
Right. So the monarchy is forced to take all of that dystopian, heavy weaponry and aim it inward at their own streets, at their own citizens.
I mean, the logistical nightmare of that is just staggering. They essentially have to lay siege to their own capital city.
It's suicidal.
It is. The very weapons that were supposed to guarantee their absolute security become the literal instruments of their own destruction. They end up transforming a functioning industrial superpower into a hyper-militarized urban war zone.
Tearing it all down.
Yeah, they're tearing down their own empire just to desperately try and maintain their grip on the rubble. It is the ultimate textbook collapse of a fascist state driven entirely by paranoia and the inability to adapt to a threat that refuses to play by the rules of politics.
Okay, but here's the thing about cinema.
Yeah.
You can write the most brilliant political collapse on paper, right?
Sure.
You can have this incredible script detailing the fall of the voting assembly and the militarization of the monarchy. But if the movie visually looks like a standard, brightly lit Tuesday afternoon action flick, you lose all of that mythic, terrifying weight.
Oh, absolutely. The audience just won't buy it.
Exactly. And that transitions us into what is arguably the most immersive part of this entire analysis.
Yeah.
How the film translates this heavy narrative directly into sensory warfare.
Sensory warfare is exactly the right term for this. I mean, filmmaking at this scale is essentially an assault on the senses, and it has to be highly deliberate.
Everything has to serve the tone.
Right. The visual tone and the sound design carry just as much narrative weight as the dialogue itself. If we look at the cinematography by Bhuvan Gowda, the shift in the visual palette is stark, and it's deeply psychological.
How so?
Well, we know that Part 1 was visually characterized by clean, cold, industrial grays.
Right, very metallic.
Yeah, it reflected the world we just talked about, a world of steel, rigid organization, cold bureaucracy, and mechanical efficiency. It felt sterile.
But as that bureaucracy collapses, as the firewall is smashed and this ancient wrath is finally unleashed in Part 2, those sterile grays completely vanish.
They're gone.
Right. Gowda introduces this heavy, suffocating atmosphere. The visual field becomes totally dominated by deep ambers, volcanic oranges, and low-contrast silhouettes.
Which is brilliant because the visual language is bypassing the audience's logical brain and speaking directly to the subconscious.
Right, it's visceral.
Exactly. Think about what volcanic orange represents in nature. It represents intense heat, instability, and destruction from below. By bathing the film in these tones, the environment itself looks like it is catching fire from the inside out.
It physically represents Deva.
Yes. It represents Deva, the dormant volcano finally erupting.
And the details within that environment change too, which I love. Like, smoke isn't just an aesthetic choice anymore. It becomes a storytelling device.
Oh, the smoke is crucial.
Right, because in Part 1, maybe you see smoke and you think of industrial exhaust, right? The byproduct of progress and assembly lines. But in this heavy amber environment of Part 2, the smoke becomes thick, choking soot.
It's oppressive.
It is the inescapable byproduct of widespread active warfare. And the camera work totally adapt to this new reality. We see much wider tracking shots. This isn't just, a tight, shaky gang war in an alleyway.
Oh, it's massive.
The camera pulls back to show the massive geographical displacement of entire tribes. It gives you a true, terrifying sense of epic scale.
But as impactful as the cinematography is, I think the auditory experience is arguably even more aggressive in how it manipulates the audience.
Oh, the sound design is incredible.
The sonic weaponry deployed by the composer, Ravi Basrur, is a literal narrative device here. We often talk about world building in terms of maps, family trees, and written lore, right?
Yeah, the usual fantasy stuff.
Exactly. But it is incredibly rare to see world building executed entirely through a specific sound frequency.
This part of the analysis honestly blew my mind. Basrur gives the weapons used by the ancient Shouryaanga tribe a completely different auditory signature than the standard modern firearms used by the Khanzar military.
It's such a smart choice.
It's genius. The modern military has that sharp, staccato, high-treble crack of machine guns and explosions. It sounds fast and chaotic.
Like modern warfare.
Right. But the Shouryaanga weapons, the source material describes them as having this heavy, metallic, low-frequency resonance. It's the sound of ancient tribal blades clanging against armor, but it's layered over deep sub-bass drops.
Sub-bass drops.
Yeah. I want to pause on that for a second. Think about the physics of sound. What does a sub-bass drop, mixed with the agonizing scrape of an ancient blade, physically do to a human being sitting in a dark theater with a massive sound system?
Well, it creates a physiological response before your brain even has time to process what is happening on the screen.
It literally shakes you.
It does. Human anatomy reacts to low frequencies in a very specific way. A sub-bass drop, anything hovering around that 20 to 60 hertz range, is felt in the chest cavity.
Right in your sternum.
Yeah, you feel it in the sternum before it is fully registered by the ears. It mimics the acoustic signature of an earthquake or a massive predator growling.
It's primal.
Highly primal. It triggers an instinctual feeling of dread. It basically tells your nervous system that something impossibly heavy and dangerous is approaching.
So by attaching that specific chest-rattling frequency to the Shouryaanga tribe, while the modern military is just making these loud popping noises, the sound design is actively reinforcing the core theme of the entire movie.
Yes, the antiquity versus modernity theme.
Exactly. You aren't just watching the ancient world overpower the modern world on a screen. You are physically feeling it vibrate in your bones.
The ancient wrath literally sounds heavier. It sounds more grounded and more inevitable than the modern defense.
The military sounds like a frantic nuisance compared to the deep, methodical resonance of the Shouryangas.
It really does. Furthermore, the vocal elements shift as well. The background chants, which might have been faster and more aggressive earlier in the story, shift into slower, operatic rhythms.
Like a funeral march.
Exactly. They mimic a funeral dirge. Every single auditory cue is harmonizing to tell the audience that the empire is falling, and there is absolutely nothing anyone can do to stop it.
Okay, so we have meticulously constructed claustrophobic lore.
Yep.
We have a protagonist operating as a terrifying, monstrous force of nature. We have a multi-tiered bureaucratic collapse. And we have an aggressive sensory experience designed to physically suffocate you with heavy bass and volcanic visuals.
It's a lot to take in.
It's huge. When you stack all of that up, the sheer weight of these elements is staggering, which forces us to ask the most critical question. Does a film this heavy, this uncompromising, actually buckle under its own ambition?
We have to look at the cinematic ledger.
Right. Let's look at the ledger. What are the true breakthroughs here, and where are the glaring vulnerabilities?
It is a vital assessment because ambition of this scale always comes with a cost.
Always.
So let's start with the triumphs, because they are significant. Structurally, the film executes a nearly flawless parallel screenplay.
Which is so hard to pull off.
Incredibly hard. It is running 3 distinct, massive timelines simultaneously. You have the ancient mythic history of the tribes and how the blood debt was formed.
Right, the lore.
Then you have the specific brutal genocide that occurred in 1985. And finally, you have the current active war tearing Khanzar apart.
Juggling 3 timelines in a 3-hour action movie sounds like an absolute recipe for a convoluted, pacing-destroying mess.
Usually it is.
Right. Usually when movies try this, the audience completely loses the emotional thread because they are too busy trying to remember what decade they are watching. How on earth do they keep the audience anchored?
They keep the audience anchored through a startlingly mature creative lens. And by mature, I mean the director completely and utterly rejects the standard commercial compromises that plague blockbuster filmmaking.
No studio notes.
Right. Think about a typical massive franchise film. Studio executives constantly panic about the tone. They say, it's too grim, the audience needs a break, throw in a sudden romantic subplot so the lead has someone to kiss.
Add a goofy sidekick to crack jokes.
Break the tension, exactly.
Right, they want to make sure it appeals to every possible demographic, which usually just waters down the actual story into this beige, generic sludge.
Precisely. But this film refuses to do that. There are no sudden romantic tracks to distract from the impending doom. There are no lighthearted comedic relief characters popping up to crack a joke after a massacre.
Thank goodness.
The tone remains absolutely grim, focused entirely on the world building and the tragedy. And because the tone never wavers, those three timelines don't feel like distractions. They function purely as deep historical context for the violence on screen.
So it all serves a purpose.
Yeah, the lack of commercial fluff is what actually allows the complex structure to hold together.
I have so much respect for that. Treating the audience like adults, demanding that they sit in the dark and engage with a grim, complex reality without holding their hands or apologizing for the tone, that is incredibly rare in modern blockbusters.
It is.
It says, no, you are going to hold your breath and you are going to experience this world exactly as it is. However, that exact uncompromising nature is a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It is exactly what leads to the film's major vulnerabilities.
It is a significant vulnerability for sure. The very elements that make it a masterpiece of structural mythic storytelling are the exact elements that will completely alienate a massive portion of the casual viewing audience.
It's just too dense for some.
Way too dense. There is an incredibly high barrier to entry here. The screenplay does not stop to re-explain things. It assumes, no, actually it demands, that you have an almost textbook memory of the intricate subclans, the complex rules of the voting assembly, the geographical layout of Khanzar, and the sheer volume of character names and portrayals established in the first film.
If you are a casual viewer who walked into Part 2 because you had a free Friday night, and you vaguely remember watching Part 1 while scrolling through your phone 2 years ago,
Oh, you're done.
you are going to be completely and utterly lost within the first 15 minutes.
You will be completely adrift. It requires active, hyper-engaged viewership. You cannot casually consume this film. And honestly, even for the hardcore fans who do remember the lore perfectly, there is a physical cost to watching it.
Right, we talked about the sensory warfare.
Yeah, the heavy sub-bass drops, the suffocating smoke, the volcanic visuals. When you combine that with rapid speed ramp editing techniques during the action sequences, it creates a massive cognitive load.
It's exhausting.
Your brain and your ears are constantly processing intense, low-frequency dread and rapid visual information for hours.
It's like trying to run a sprint while in a smoke-filled room with heavy metal playing directly into your ears.
That is painfully accurate.
It is an incredible physical and mental feat, and you might appreciate the artistry of it, but by the time you reach the final act, you're going to be exhausted. The cinematic fatigue is a real physiological consequence of the director's uncompromising vision.
So when we step back and look at the entire deconstruction, the mythic engine replacing modern morality, the agonizing weight of the hidden exile, the systemic collapse of the dark state, the sensory assault, and the heavy toll it takes on the audience, what is the overarching achievement of Salaar, Part 2?
So what does this all mean? I think it represents a massive, undeniable milestone in high-concept Indian action tragedy.
I'd agree with that.
It proves a fundamental point about how to build a world. True world building, the kind that actually sticks with you, doesn't just scale outward into bigger explosions, more CGI aliens, or space lasers.
No, it goes deeper.
True world building scales inward. It digs deep into the roots, the generational bloodlines, and the inescapable history of the characters. It makes the world feel heavy.
But for all of that density, for all of the diesel punk aesthetics, the hyper-violence, the sub-bass drops, and the complex voting blocks, the architecture of this film would completely collapse if it wasn't anchored by something human.
Oh, totally.
Beneath the scale of a collapsing empire, the narrative is grounded in something universally relatable. The agonizing, irreparable heartbreak of a ruined childhood friendship between Deva and Varda.
That is the emotional core. That is what makes the mythology actually matter. Without that grounded, deeply personal pain, the destruction of Khanzar is just noise and rubble.
It's just special effects.
Exactly. But because we know it stems from a fractured bond between two boys who once cared for each other, It transcends action and becomes a genuine tragedy. It is a phenomenal balancing act between micro-level personal devastation and macro-level geopolitical collapse.
It forces us to witness how a broken promise between friends can eventually tear an entire civilization apart.
It really does. And it leaves me with a final lingering thought for you to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time talking about that high barrier to entry. The fact that this film demands you have a textbook memory of its complex lore and intentionally subjects you to absolute sensory overdrive without ever apologizing or offering a comedic break.
Right.
Does a story's world building being that dense and demanding make it a purer, more elevated form of art because it boldly refuses to compromise its vision for the lowest common denominator?
Or does it just push people away?
Exactly. Or, by actively alienating casual viewers and causing physical cinematic fatigue, does it fail the basic test of cinematic accessibility?
It is the ultimate question about the nature of blockbuster art. Are we there to be comfortably entertained, or are we there to be challenged and overwhelmed?
Where exactly do you draw the line between a deeply rewarding intellectual challenge and sheer sensory exhaustion in the media you choose to consume? It's something to think about the next time you sit down at a dark theater. Because as we've explored today, sometimes that majestic, futuristic empire you're marveling at on screen is just a house of cards, waiting to collapse under the weight of an ancient, unpaid blood debt.